All right, I've been off for a bit, so not off of work, but off of hanging out with you guys. So let's hop on here. Put my little cozy scene on for a minute here. I'm just kidding. I'm not gonna leave that on too long. Let's hop on. Let's do. What are we doing today? So we're gonna hang out. We're gonna work on getting a little better at Linux. Some of you guys want to figure out how to get the job, and that's kind of what I'm gonna work on, at least from my perspective and my experience in doing this stuff. People are always asking down in the Discord, and that's what the Discord is for people to talk about getting into Linux. So I wrote up my notes a while back, and these are kind of my thoughts on it, and then we're going to work through some of that stuff. So if anybody wants to hang out and do that, that's what we're doing. If you guys want to ask me questions about this stuff, that's fine too. I'm just going to try to get some hours of streaming in, since I haven't been streaming all week. I've really just my dissertation, my internal review board got approved, meaning I can do research. You can't do research. You can't collect any research until you get that part done. So I've been kind of busy with, I got that approved Monday or Tuesday, whenever I post in the Discord. Anyway, so that's just stuff that I'm doing on the side. One of my excuses for not being on here as much. But talking about getting into Linux admin work, I'm going to leave these notes up because I think these are important. These are also in the Discord. And when we're done, I'll put them in the notes section of the Discord as well. So the first thing they talk about, or the first thing I mentioned when I first did this, was you need to get skills in Linux. That's the first part of getting into this space. I would also maybe add, maybe like a sub skill is you definitely need to focus on your networking, and you definitely need to focus on your security. Those are going to be things that you always have in an engineering space. I actually heard a really interesting perspective about that today that I'll mention here in a little bit when we get in the security part of it. But you know, you need to get these skills in Linux. I think Killer Code is probably one of the best places to get hands-on task-based skills. So you hop over here, you drop in Killer Coda, and let's make sure I'm still logged in. I'm pretty sure I am, but if I am not, I can go in as creator, drop in over here, and start to learn about Linux, right? Bunch of labs here. There's all kinds of labs that are free out there. But let's say I wanted to learn a little bit about Linux. This will drop me in a Ubuntu 2404 shell, and I could start to learn Linux right here. If anybody wants to do like this lab with me, we're not going to focus on labs all day like we normally do on Sundays. Normally Sundays are just us hanging out doing labs. But I just wanted to show you guys a little bit here where it does look like they've changed this formatting around a little bit. But maybe I hop in on a Linux box here. Maybe I've never been at a command line, never done anything with the shell before, and I decide to hop in here and look, and I say I'm a new system administrator at a company, and I've been tasked to find out about our servers. The company's in a state of disarray. That's very common with smaller or medium-sized companies, where maybe I'm in here and I'm trying to figure out, what's going on with these machines, trying to figure out what versions they are, make sure they're all the same across the board. Different things get built all kinds of different ways, and who knows what's going on with that. So, I need to understand the release and the version of the systems that I'm working on. I need to know the kernel version. I need to know how long the system's been up, right? How long a system's been up will tell us a lot about that system from a troubleshooting standpoint, for sure. If something's wrong with the system, we will we will guide our troubleshooting activities differently based on whether it's going one way or another. If it's just rebooted, we're going to look at startup stuff. Did something not start up? If it hasn't just rebooted, we're going to look typically for performance where things have peaked and queues and timeouts are happening. So we're looking at logs and those kind of things. So I'm just saying it kind of splits the direction of where we're going, whether or not a server's been up for a long time. It's actually funny in this environment, servers, when people are really churning on Killer Coda, you'll see the servers down only existing for like 30 minutes because the servers come up and then they sit and wait for somebody to connect to them. And then when people disconnect from a lab, it wipes the whole thing. So the fact that they're almost at like 4 hours of uptime means there's not a lot of people in these systems. And you say, Scott, how do you know? I've just been on Killer Coda for many years, and I just know from doing these labs for a long time that they definitely just have the server sit there, and when it's higher usage, there's a lower uptime on them. So that's kind of funny. Also, I build labs for them, so that's kind of good. But I say use the solution to follow along, and you can just hit these buttons here. If you've never done any Linux, you can just hit the buttons and look at the output. So if you didn't know what that command was doing, if you didn't know what a cat was, and if you didn't know what a standard input was, and if you didn't know what an argument was over here, the argument that you're giving to cat for the file that you want to execute the command against, and you didn't know what this glob meant, or what we often call a splat, and you didn't know that that meant like a wildcard expansion. If you didn't know any of that, you could at least look at this and go, well, that command is useful if I want to know the type of system I'm on. And this is one of the things I tell you guys when we talk about learning systems and learning anything. Sometimes you just go through the motions and do the thing, and then you go and you learn all the proclivities of it later, right? Like all those things I just said are things you do need to eventually learn and know, but not at first. At first, you just need to know if I type in the command cat, which shows me a file or can concatenate files, and I do it against the file name of this, which I don't know that that means anything like that. I don't know that that's a wildcard expansion at the time. This will give me an answer that I need. And then I'll go dig in on all that other stuff later, right? So it's that analogy I use all the time that people are probably tired of. But, you know, if you saw two of your buddies that were always going to the gym and the girls were always checking them out, and then you said, oh, I want to go do that and go learn the gym, your friends aren't going to sit you down in the locker room for 8 hours and tell you about how the gym works. They're going to tell you just follow them around the gym. And it's the same kind of way that I like to show people Linux, because I think that you can, you know, most of you that are paying attention probably are like, all right, I got those 3 commands. Let's move on. Let's go do something else, because it's, you know, you get it. You can just follow along and do this stuff with me, and you'll pick up what's going on in proc later. Maybe at first you don't know what's going on in the proc directory, but you know that if you do cat proc command line, it'll tell you the command line arguments that were given to the kernel as the system booted. Maybe that's all you know at first, right? And then you go from there. Watchmakering, how's it going? Good morning. Yeah, we're just hanging out. I haven't been on stream for a while, so I thought I'd hop on and go with one of the topics that I guess you could say I'm passionate about, but it's the idea like, how are we going to get people into Linux, right? How do you get yourself into the Linux world? We have a lot of resources, I think, to get people the skills of Linux, right? Now, I want to also say this is really important in that, like, you can do the job, right? But then I have down here, I split this as kind of like a distinction here. You need to learn the job. You need to know what people want to hire you for. This is why I have all these talks out there and all this stuff in our Discord about, you know, engineering is the search for truth. Administration is like keeping systems up and stable. This is what people are paying you money for. They're not nobody is paying me. Nobody has ever paid me in my whole career for all the stuff I know. What I mean by that is, I know thousands of Linux commands, right? And like sit here and brag all day about it. Who cares? That's not what somebody's going to give you money for. It's like I still tell my college students this. Nobody gives a shit that you got a degree. Good job. They care that you can do the work. The path of getting the degree is supposed to change you to be able to do the work, right? Some of you guys know I do this sport called Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Having a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu doesn't mean I don't get my ass kicked if I don't know how to do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu that day. If I go in there and some 22-year-old college wrestler comes in and just beats the shit out of me because I'm not defending myself, the fact that I have a black belt doesn't matter, right? Does that kind of make sense? It's the same idea. You need to learn what people are paying you for. I often call this like learning how to play the game, right? It's like in college, or school in general, you know, it's super, super hard until you realize if I just do the work, I'll get the good grades and then nobody will bug me and I won't have to get yelled at. And it's a simple little game to play, right? Anyways, all right. So, you know, you're maybe doing one of these other things, but sysadmin, you know, we got this free course out there that'll help you get into like what the business wants, right? Why does the person want to hire you, right? And then I think you need to put together a resume, and I think you need to practice talking the talk, being able to like walk through these things with people and that kind of stuff. There's ways to do that. We also have stuff. Again, most of this is just a sales pitch for our free Discord, right? I like people hanging out down there. We have almost 5,000 of us down there, so we're getting respectable size, you know. But I tell people all the time, if even 1 or 2 people can get into the Linux field, you know, I feel like I'm successful in that sense. But you need to get skills in Linux, right? So you need to come over here. Killer Code is a great way to do it. Another way is, you know, definitely for sure, Killer Coda is so. let's just say on this, maybe I'll move these down a little bit. Maybe I'll say down here, hands on is killer coda. It will go like this. And then I will be something like, let's say something like build a home lab. Now home labs can get expensive though. So like when we're first starting out, one of the reasons I like killer coda so much is your cost to use it is zero. I've been building labs and playing with killer coda for like probably almost 4 years now, and it's great. The only downside I have for killer coda is that you're doing stuff in Ubuntu. You're not doing stuff in like Red Hat and Rocky Linux, which is why in the home lab, you know, we have the ability for you guys to log in. So it's actually funny, since my system's restarted, I haven't opened up my putty session. So in my home lab, right, go drop down here to like my jump box for home. Jump in, right? Hop on some Linux server, right? Some jump box that I have in my internal home lab. And then from here, let's do screen ls. Here's my screen session. Boom. There I am reconnected back into my lab, doing all the different things that I was doing. I can jump between my different environments and see what's kind of going on, whatever we were working on last, right? And Screen is this awesome tool for us as administrators to get into a system, to drop out, to get back in, do all those kind of things. Let me see. Hello, I'm new here. Is this an update to your existing Linux, YouTube? Yeah, so I have Linux admin stuff. No, this isn't like an addition to it. This is just us hanging out on a Sunday morning talking about this stuff. This isn't probably going to go in any of those playlists, not right off. So, but that is a good question, though. No, I do have a Linux admin playlist. That 16-week Linux admin course is completely done. If you're like, hey, I need to get in there and I need to know more about that course is free. But let me pull up... that course is free, but that course is here. So this is the Linux sysadmin course right here. And by the way, the guys have done, so people within our community, if you're ever in our Discord, they have done a really good job of putting together these books. So there's the prologue books. Let's go back all the way here to just the home here. Here's the prologue page. I'll just give you guys this if anybody wants it. Boom, put that on both sides here. The guys have done a really good job putting these books together. So let's go back here to, so like Linux admin course. This is the 16-week course right here. So let's say you were wanting to do the course. You would just hop in here. You'd go to the intro. It would tell you a little bit about Linux file operations. That's one of the first things we learn about. And then it gives you some information. There's a worksheet. There's also my video. So this is the week 1 video here. The guys embedded that. Information about if you wanted to get the job in Linux, you would go and you would rate yourself on how well you think you know these things. And then there's just a whole bunch of stuff. And then there's a lab. And the lab, you can either connect directly to Killer Coda, or you can connect into our lab system. I have a way for you guys to connect in on Discord. And then you go through and you just do some commands, right? We could just start doing these commands in a Linux box. Again, like I said, I think the best way for you guys to learn is to follow along and do things. And then you're going to have aha moments as you go. But you're like learning the task here of maybe working with files. In this case, you're touching some files, you're creating some files, you're doing redirects. You're like, I don't know what that is, but I see that it's making the file bigger. Like I keep doing this echo command like this and it keeps making the file bigger. Okay, I know that 2 greater than signs is a redirect with an append as opposed to just clobbering a file and rewriting it. You don't understand all that at first, right? I'm not saying any one of you in general. I'm just saying, people, they don't understand that, but over time they start to learn what's happening with these commands, right? So we just kind of walk you through these things and we make you do these things, and the guys have added so much to these labs. I think it's great. But then you come down here, you learn a little bit about file permissions, and you just keep going. Yeah, the royal U. Yeah. That's actually funny you say that. Does everybody here know what the royal we is? I always think, like, because I'll joke around about Scott speaking in the third person right now, and when Scott's happy, I joke around about that. But we, the royal we, is like one of the most arrogant things I've ever heard. Because when a king says we are not pleased, he's saying he and I. God and I as equals. He's saying I and the only person equal to me, which is God, are deigning this about you, or whatever, deeming this, right? Whatever word I'm looking for. And I just think that's kind of funny that's like the most arrogant thing I think I've ever heard. But anyways, so Your Highness said, I'm sorry if it's off topic. Is there going to be alternative for the Discord server? Yeah, so I've thought about that a little bit, Your Highness 97. If Discord does get too crazy, because I've heard about that, they're going to need some IDs, and I think it's interesting because we have Discord users all over planet Earth. I think we have somebody from maybe not every country, but most countries in our Discord. And I think that I'm wondering how that's going to work with like the ID and stuff for people in other countries. But I think we're going to ride out the Discord as long as we can because it is free. We could, there's other places we could meet, although I do think Discord's kind of convenient. We could do Slack. Slack's a perfectly acceptable tool. Most of us use Slack for work. I use Slack all the time for work. But yeah, I don't really have an alternative yet, Your Highness 97. But I will tell you that we will try to, at least figure something out. I could always run a Mattermost server. We used to run Mattermost at AAA back in the day, me and my brother. And Mattermost was such a good thing. We stopped doing it because the company wanted official conversations to be official, but we used it as like a documentation site within our Unix team. Well, we were the mid-range Unix and Linux type team, so there was that. So anyways, let's see this. Lampfowl said, during uni, we as script in Linux mid-level programming questions as scripts. It was the most annoying thing. That's actually funny. I do a fair amount of scripting, but most nowadays I do things in Ansible because Ansible is just a great tool for me. So, okay. But anyways, we're here on learning Linux, right? So the goal is, get skills in Linux. The admin job, though, the admin, if you do our admin course, looks like the guys added a bonus here. So there's other things, other modules like getting into Vim. You do need to know how to pop into like VI here, VI or Vim, right? Let's just clear the screen here. VI, Etsy cron tab, let's say, and you need to know how to. Well, let's not do that. I don't know what's going on with. I don't know what's going on with that screen session. Let's reconnect. Let's just get out all this. We'll just get out all of them. We could kill them, but let's just go. No screen set. Get out of that one. Yeah. All right, so screen's gone. We'll just connect to a screen session that's clean now. Oh, let me get rid of that. Hold on. That one little thing up there bugging me. Get out of there. Okay. What was I saying? Oh, screen sessions. Anyways, let's go to like cron tab. Let's just say in here, you need to know how to move around in here. You need to know how to go to like insert mode or to edit this file in some way, how to save it or not save it when you go in or out of it. You have to just know the basics of this. So this is a useful thing that, and some people go, well, I can do it in VS Code. You can do a lot of cool things in VS Code, sure. And you may say, well, I can do it in Nano or Emacs, or I can do all these other editors and all these other types of things. And I say, that's wonderful, that's fine, but you will find that VI and Vim, but VI is a larger subset, is just going to be everywhere. It's going to be on all the different types of systems you run on. It's going to be the way that you can quickly modify things and test things and save things. There's just a lot of stuff you can do inside of VI that I really do think as a Linux admin and then later on in engineering, you need to understand that tool. It's your way to interact with the system and modify things. So VI, Vim, NeoVim, I don't care what version of it you use. I don't care how many colors you like on it and all the shortcuts you love. You need to know the basics of it. You need to know how to get in a file, modify the file, make sure your changes have been taken. Those are like kind of core skills for us in the Linux world. So that's here. That's in this discussion. This wasn't the main thing that we were focusing on today. But since it was asked about the sysadmin course, yeah, the sysadmin course I think is great for this. And I try to tell you guys too, the Linux admin course was not designed to be just Linux from a like a technical standpoint. I think technical Linux, this first part here, the technical Linux stuff, you can go pick this up anywhere. You could go read blog posts and that kind of stuff. It's more like getting and learning the job. That's what the Linux admin course is for, is like how you do Linux administration in the wild. Oh yeah, we still talk about all the techniques and stuff, but the focus is not up here on learning Linux, because I kind of, for the sysadmin course, you kind of already know Linux, or you've been playing with Linux for a while or something. Adaverk, how's it going? How would you store so many messages for Mattermost? Would you allow media image? I would probably allow all that stuff, Adaverk, yeah. I've not played with Mattermost in a long time, but I know it's still being developed. So I would probably just run it. So there's two ways I could run Mattermost. I could run it up in AWS somewhere if we wanted to, and that would probably incur some small amount of cost. We'd probably have to deal with performance at some point if a lot of people were using it. We do have numbers on like how often people send messages in our Discord. We can see that stuff now. That side of it would be like that would be nothing. You could run that on like a pretty small little Linux server. When we were going to do voice and other meeting type things, we would have to scale up some things and really think about how we were doing that. And I don't even know if Mattermost has all that functionality. I don't remember ever talking voice in Mattermost, but I imagine if they're trying to keep up, they're still doing that. If I don't remember, I don't have bouncer. I'll miss all the messages if I'm not connected. Yeah, so yeah, that'll be another thing, Adaverk. We'll have to work through that. So for now, like the most convenient thing in all the world is if Discord would just let people keep connecting. But if we do have problems with Discord, then we'll have to work through that for sure. Lamp Valley said, personally, I type my server code on 8085 and use AI to translate it to modern hardware like professional. Okay. So do you think that the migration to cloud is going to kill the traditional sysadmin? I don't think so. I mean, we've been moving to cloud since 2008, right? Like, I mean, cloud really started blowing up in the early 2000 teens, but 2008 is when AWS released its first service. So I don't think sysadmin's going away because of cloud, because everybody I know that's running cloud still needs sysadmins up in the cloud. Well, I know a couple companies that don't need sysadmins because they do everything in like Elastic Beanstalk, but I'm pretty sure that service is going away soon too. So yeah, so anyway, so on this, I just wanted you guys to see, and where'd my other window go? Let me pull this back up. I'm just gonna drop this over here for now, so it's all in the same window. Get that out of the way. There we go. All right, drop that right there. Good. So we still have our little window here if we wanted to see Linux in like a command line. I'm telling you guys, Killer Coda, one of the best places to just get in there if you're not comfortable with Linux yet and you're trying to get there. I just think that this thing has a lot of good stuff for you. All right. And then Samantha Nakamoto, hi, how's it going? We're just hanging out today talking about getting into Linux and getting kind of the Linux skills that you need. You know, what skills you need, how you need to understand this stuff. I do think building and running a home lab is probably pretty good, but again, there's cost considerations. So for hands-on Killer Coda, short labs, right? Just killercoda.com. Building a home lab, a little more expensive, but you've got tools like you can use Proxmox if you need. Do I have Proxmox up here? Let's go see. I think Proxmox is right here. Yeah. Don't care about that. So here's my Proxmox, right? For some of my servers. Well, one server's on Proxmox, and then all my virtualized machines underneath it. And then I have 4 other machines that are still back over on XCPNG, and they're my physical boxes that do all kind of different little virtual stuff inside of them, right? We have probably about 80 or 90 servers in the lab, and then we have a Bastion node where people can connect in and that kind of stuff, which we're not going to go over all that now, but that's a good thing to understand as well. If you're interested in Bastions, we have a whole course on it, a whole section on it on Unit 4 of the Security Engineering course. All right. So anyways, where were we going with that? Next thing, I think you need to know networking, and I think you need to have at least like a high level understanding of networking. Now, I'm not saying you need to be an expert on it. Like I don't think you need to be like, high level Cisco or anything, but I do think you should understand kind of the pieces that go into networking. And you say, Scott, why is that? Well, I say because every Linux box you're ever going to touch is going to be connected to a network. Everything you ever design or set up is going to touch a network in some way. So there you go. Even the things that are air gapped off are going to be on their own network inside of the air gapped environment. So for capacity reasons, for expansion, for knowing why something has to go to the router, or if it can talk directly because it's in the same subnet, for knowing that kind of thing, it's very important, right? These are things that are very important. So you might say, well, Scott, where would I go for that? Well, in our lab or in our Discord, we have some good places, but I'm a big fan of the Red Books. So they have a lot of IBM Red Books, and they've got this one on TCP IP, and it even says right here it's archived. So it's older, right? It's from 2006, if I recall. Yeah, December of 2006. But this is still one of my favorite things to show people, because I think that, I can link this to you guys if you want it. I think that this is one of the best places that you can go and get into like the basics of what people are talking about with networking, right? Like you're like, I just want to understand the model. What is the model? Okay, so things are talking and there's some routers, and okay, there's this thing called TCP IP, and I can read about that. What are the protocol layers? Okay, application transport, internetwork, network interface, and hardware. Okay, so data are flowing up and down through these layers, but what does that look like? Well, people also have this OSI model. The OSI model is much more common for teaching. So we drop down a little bit, maybe we read a little bit, and then we get down into what happened when we got into, I thought they had the OSI model. Here's the OSI model. And the OSI model is the one that I teach from. I've been teaching that for 18 years of college now, right? It'll be 18 years. I guess it's closer to 17 than 18 right now, but it'll be 18 at the end of this year that I've been teaching. This is the one that I tend to use. But the point is, as you're reading this book and going through it and stuff, is you can start to hear the terms and the things that people talk about in networking, right? And you start to understand the way that these things work. So I think that book's a great book to start. You really only need to go through page... That's up here. I always tell people stop at like this page before it gets into stuff that's not really necessary. Yeah, you really only need to go to page like 170 for the basics, right? You can keep going further if you want, but I'm just saying that stuff starts to get into like programming routers and CLI stuff that I don't think definitely matters to most people unless you're on the networking side of things. On the Linux side of things, we need to understand how to interact with our networks. Anyway, so to that point, networking in the Linux world, we have a bunch of labs that do that, but this one's a pretty big one right here. So networking and ports, looking at this stuff. So we'll go look at some of those skills real quick. If anybody wants to do the lab with me, here it is. Linking it on both sides. All right. And what was the question? Do you think RAM apocalypse will end? Asking from home. Adavirk, I bought my last system probably right before that exploded recently, so I'm not even sure where that's going to go. I think it's interesting that RAM is getting so high a price again, because that tends to not even be the bottleneck for a lot of this stuff. It's the CPU, GPUs, but at least as far as like AI stuff goes. But yeah, I do think it's interesting that different prices are fluctuating as different things are kind of getting to be the hotness or whatever. So yeah, thankfully I haven't had to buy anything in the tech space for a while. Most of the projects I'm on are already designed. I do a lot of drop-in work with my company from Dell stuff that's already in engagement. Everything's already been planned out. I'm just coming in and I'm doing the setup of a lot of times the Werewolf cluster manager for the high performance compute stuff. Do you use any of these LLMs that are out there, by the way? And do you think AI can help Linux admin engineers in their work? Oh, yeah. So I have a whole set of servers that run LLMs in our internal stuff. I think they might be off right now because we're not using them. So the Llama server that I have, that runs, it's one of those, what the hell's the name of that? You can switch them out with Llama pretty quickly, what model you're running. But yeah, so what we tend to use, so the question, guys, was, are LLMs helping Linux admins and engineers? And I think the answer to that's 100% yes. Because what they're doing is they're doing a really good job of like the basic things that you used to like maybe have a junior engineer do, and then you'd have to check. So like I might show some junior engineer on my team, or maybe some Linux admin that wants to work on the engineering team a little more. I would show them maybe, hey, here's what we're doing so far, right? We're doing all patching, but I need a new role written inside of Ansible that will do these 3 other things, and I just don't have time to write it. So then what our junior admin or engineer would go do typically is go run off for a few hours and try to figure it out and write it. And then they come back to me and go, does this look right? And I go, well, let's test it on one of our test machines. And we'd run it, and we'd find some errors, and we'd work it. And it's almost like a mentor relationship. Where I'm going with that is like LLMs are taking a lot of that away, where like I don't need to send that work off anymore. I can actually just write the comments, like I want to do these things inside of Ansible, and it'll be like, oh yeah, no, I can do that for you. I'll write that for you. In fact, I got a lab that I need to write. I got 4 labs I need to write for our automation course. And when I go in there, and I'm going to be writing some errors inside of, because we're doing troubleshooting next week, so I'm going to be writing errors into some of our Ansible code and stuff like that. And what I'll do is I'll just go write, I want to copy a file from here to here, and it'll write the tasks and do all that for me. It'll look something like this. Let's say, so unit 11, I haven't done this one yet. Like I haven't fixed this lab up yet. But let's say I went in here to like, let's go here. So here's a playbook, right? And this playbook goes and executes, if anybody's wondering, it goes and executes some information and pulls from an API, right? This is a Ansible playbook. And I'm going to go down here, right? And I'm going to go at the end of this, right? And I'm just going to say, oh, look, it's already trying to. I didn't even tell it to do anything yet. And I'm going to say, yeah, let's hit tab and just let it do that. And then we'll say, okay, yeah, do that and do that. All right. So it just, you guys didn't see me write any code there, did you? Like, I have nothing up my sleeves. All I hit was tab. But it wanted to guess for me that I wanted to debug the magnitude of the first earthquake. And debug is kind of like your show message for, well, debug is a show message in a lot of things, but in Ansible, when we use debug, we use it to pull a variable out. So we're using a message, magnitude of the first earthquake is, and then we do earthquake data.content from JSON. So we basically extract the JSON, and we get feature 0 properties.magnitude, and that, if we were to run this, if we were to go execute this as its own playbook, it would run in our environment, and it would go and pull that code and do whatever we wanted it to do. And actually, I mean, we could pull this out right now and test it over here if we wanted to, right? So my point in showing you that is that right there is something like, maybe I said, hey, I've got like these 4 things I want to add to this playbook. I'm going to close this without saving it because I don't want to modify that for right now. But let's say that that was something that I wanted to do, right? That was something I want to do. I don't now need to go give that to a junior engineer or a junior admin anymore to muck around with for a few hours. That thing will do that for me, and I can very quickly go, oh yeah, that's good. Then I can get right into testing it. Now, that being said, I'm not saying that that is taking the place of like you still need junior admins and junior engineers to do stuff. But they're going to be picking up that stuff and doing that. And then now, instead of being like a 6-hour block of them figuring that out, hopefully that's only like a 15-minute thing for them, and they're getting right into testing. And very quickly, when they start getting to doing their own testing and their own builds and that kind of stuff themselves, they're not junior anymore. Now they're starting to be more like mid-level. And then as they start to understand why they're doing this stuff and what tasks are coming down the pike for all the different systems going forward, now they start to become more seniors and more valuable to an organization, right? Because they understand why they're doing the thing, not just the fact that they're doing it. But yeah, a lot of like the underlying code work and stuff like that I used to have to do, where I'd go reference the manual or go reference it online for like how the module works and what the different arguments are for the module. Don't have to do that anymore. It's all just hit tab, tab, tab. Now, does it break and do you still need to go test it? Absolutely. It's just that it's not a 6-hour time frame for somebody to figure out how to do it anymore. It's a 15-minute time frame. And then the 2 hours that you were going to test and reboot and build systems over time and get it right and make sure, because obviously our human logic's still flawed, so we got to go fix that stuff. My point in saying that all is you're gonna get to that part faster, and maybe that takes you 3 hours, but what do I care? I still save 6 hours on the front end, if that kind of makes sense. I kind of want to say it's like the knowledge is closer to your fingertips now for the stuff that you don't have to like memorize anymore. If that, hopefully that clears that up a little bit. Let me move this up a little bit. There you go. All right. Any extension recommendations? I don't even know what that extension is here inside of VS Code. That just started, I think it's a Copilot extension that just exists in VS Code. Because I was looking it up and I was like, something has to be paying for this, right? Like I don't pay for it. VS Code is just part of my system. Or I downloaded it, you know, it's open source, but it is from Microsoft, so it is still connecting back to something. And it just turned on one day, and I'm like, well, whatever, I don't really care. This is all lab stuff. This is all, I have this going to an open GitHub anyway, so I really don't care what the back end is or if somebody's grabbing my work for me. I would probably be much more concerned if I was doing like proprietary stuff with my code. But stuff out, this is my home box, I don't care. My development stuff for Noah is over here, and I only use theirs, so I do Noah work. That's NOAA. Yeah, NOAA. And I do that on their box. And if I'm going to use any LLMs, I'm going to use it inside of their Google ones that they pay for. So they have, as a government organization, they have a Google account that allows certain amount of LLM use and all that kind of stuff. And if I'm going to use that kind of stuff and that tooling, I'm going to do that in their system, if that makes sense. I don't use like stuff that's proprietary or belongs to the government or something. I won't do that out on a system that any like. But here I don't care because this is all open anyway. You guys can go, this whole workflow right here, all my Prolog labs, they're up on my GitHub. You could pull them. You could be up on Killer Coda with your labs the same way. They're all free, so I really don't care, right? Right, they're all free. But all right. Anyways, Ubuntu, you can come in here. And it says you're a new system administrator company. We were talking about networking, right? And getting hands-on skills in networking for a system. Well, there's a lot of ways to, I think, understand this, but mainly you need to know how your system's connected to the network. You need to know where that configuration exists. You need to understand how your system sends and gets information. So we got a bunch of solution stuff down here. You can say IP adder like that. You can say, I like IP. Let me show you guys this. I really like IP -BR ADDR. It's one of my favorite ways to look at this, because then now it's just a lot nicer and cleaner. I'll make that a little smaller so it fits better, but it's just very clean. It's a very clean little output. Is the interface up or down? What's the IPv4 and, if applicable, an IPv6 address? That's interesting. Is the system dual stack? Do I know what dual stack means? Do I understand if I'm using IPv4 and IPv6, what the implications of that are? If I maybe do an IPR, do I understand what my routing is? Does my system has an IPv6 address, but does it have the capability of doing IPv6 routing? Or is that something else going on there, right? So we have a lot of good information here that, you know, I think you need to understand, like, what's the route that my system's going to take to get to somewhere? We need to understand what the slash, you know, what the CIDR, that's the notation over here. The /24 means that there's 24 bits. So if we were talking about the subnet mask, it would be 255.255.255.0, right? And what's the implication of that? Well, that means that this interface is on a network that maps to 172.30.1, because when we AND the bits, those are the ones that stay the same. And the .2 drops off if we're talking about the network, and the network is 172.30.1.0 and a /24, right? You say, well, how do you know that? Well, because that's how networking works. And that's a thing that you've got to learn, right, if you're not familiar. Now, I have a whole bunch of talks on that, and I have, if you go to the YouTube and you look at our networking primer, I have the networking primer. If you're like, well, what's the networking primer? It looks like this. I'll show you guys. We'll run through it real quick. We're not going to do the networking primer right now, but networking primer basically looks like this. Hold on, let me get this out of the way. This is the networking primer. And we're not going to go through it right now, but this is, you know, if you wanted to know some networking, I do have a 3-hour recording or so on this. That is, you know, why do we subnet? How does subnetting work? How do we break down subnets and networks? It's actually interesting to me. Can you guys see that? It's interesting to me that this right here is not rendering properly in my OBS, all these dashes here, but looking on the screen down there, it looks like they are. That's interesting. But up here in my OBS on the left, these are not showing. That's wild. That's a weird bug for OBS. Anyways, don't care. Don't care as long as you guys are seeing it correctly. Let me check on YouTube. Hold on. Let me check YouTube. Yeah, YouTube's seeing it, right? Okay. So I can see my Twitch and my YouTube screen. These lines right here don't show up in OBS. And neither do these lines right here. Isn't that weird? Like, these lines down here do, though. That's a weird bug in OBS. It doesn't even show it. That's super strange. Huh. Anyway, I guess that's not that big of a deal. But how does the OSI model work? How are the data flowing in our networks? And then we just walk through the different layers. Right? That's what this talk is about. I have to update that talk because I have a bunch of stuff to add to that. But anyways, my point in that is, like, you need to know networking at the very minimum. Know how the system connects to IPv4 or IPv6. Know how the system thinks is routing. So know how the system is routing, because that helps you troubleshoot where things are going to go. Like if I want to ping right here, what happened right there? When I pinged Google, where are the things that could break? Well, I see a name resolution here. I gave it a name, but it says I'm pinging an IP address. Well, how did that happen? Well, it's a tool called DNS. DNS exists at layer 7 of the OSI model. So if that name resolution occurred, and it didn't come from a host file, right? I don't think Google's in my host file. I know it's not actually, but let's say I know it isn't, which we do. That resolution had to have gone all the way out, asked something about the DNS query, and gotten a response back. Well, that happened over port 53, right? 53 is DNS. There's a secure DNS port too, but generally speaking, we're not using that. There is DNS security out there nowadays so that we verify that we're talking to who we're supposed to be talking to and that kind of stuff. But then we started to see these ICMP, Internet Control Message Protocol, responses. So I sent an echo request out and they sent an echo reply back. So we have communication from here to there. I see all that. But where could that break? Well, if the DNS resolves, I know that we're leaving our network for sure, right? I know that our system is at least leaving this next hop. So our default hop is going to 172.30.1.1, presumably our network device, right? And that is going to be the default if one of these two things here aren't met. And you say, well, Scott, how do you know that one of these two things wasn't met or matched, right? And I say, well, that's networking. But so when we have a /16 here, you've got a 172.17. So you've got to match those two numbers in the number up here. Does 142.251 match 172.17 to the first 16 significant bits? No, it doesn't. And then how about, does 142.251, 152 match 170.30? I get that I'm being silly, guys. Obviously it doesn't, right? But if you don't know that, if you don't know how that mapping works, until somebody shows it to you or until you go read technical manuals, how would you ever know that? But now, so you say, well, Scott, the two routes that are defined, it wasn't those. And I say, you're right. So it had to go to the default. Our system didn't know what to do with it, and it was hot potatoing it between all the routes it knew. If you don't have a default route, it goes, oops, and it drops it on the floor. And that's it. That's game over. Your packet doesn't go anywhere. But if your packet, if there's nowhere to send it, but there's a default, it goes, oop, and then it goes and it falls in a little chute called the default, and that did get out, and that allowed that to go. So all those things to say, I know that networking is working in the system. I know I have a proper default route. I know that my system is resolving and going out to DNS. I don't have to go do an NS lookup for www.google .com and then make sure that I can ping the 8.8.8.8 resolver that we're using, and I don't need to go and cat etsy resolve.conf and see that I have a set number of like names. I don't have to do any of that because it worked, right? And that's kind of one of the things, especially when we get over into troubleshooting, which is a very useful admin thing, and engineer thing. Troubleshooting is like a big part of kind of like what we do. So if I can ping a thing by name, I can determine that all kinds of other things are correct. I know that DNS is working, so I don't need to go check that I can reach my DNS servers. I know that my default route, because I went only because I dug in a little bit, I know that my default route or some route is working. We could troubleshoot that more if some other IP address came up maybe internally and I wasn't able to get to it for some reason. But the point is I can see what's going on in my system and I can figure it out, right? Probable Steve said, hey, Scott, since you were talking about networking, I've encountered something weird at work. It's a DC environment, so it's data center. I see all the hosts are using public IPs for their BMCs and in general for any console accesses. This is generally a thing. Now, when you say public IPs, hopefully you're still talking about something internal routable, like a 172.16 or like a 10 dot. But yeah, I use IPs for those. Not publicly, not like a external one. No, they would probably typically be in the range of 10.0 something, whatever network you chose, or 172 something, or it's a 30. I've never seen that. Nope. However, I can tell you, if it's on an air gap network, and this still would be really weird what I'm about to say, but you could do what I'm about to say. If it's on an air gap network and it was for its own self, you could do whatever you wanted with those. And you say, well, wait, you mean I can use somebody else's out in the world's IP address, but only keep it internal with my routers only, and my traffic is never going to leave and go to that? Yes, you could technically do that if you wanted to. Would that be super weird, and have I never seen that? Yes. But is that something that's like technically possible? Yeah. But I've never seen 30 like that. No. I've normally seen it'll be 172.16, or we'll use like a 192 something if we have a small. So by the way, if you're using 192 and then you're assuming that it's a /24 at the end, you're using less than 254 nodes. So I'll use that on really small. I have clusters that are only 2 racks sometimes. So you guys that don't know, I do a lot of HPC with the government, and we'll build a really big system that's like 50 racks. That's a big system, guys. 50, full U racks like in the data center is pretty big. But next to it we'll have a test system, and the test system will be like 5 racks. But it'll be the same exact system, just smaller. And then we'll have another one that's like 3 racks or 2 racks. And you go, why the heck would you have that one? And why would it be running? That last one is typically like it's a really, really far off R&D, but it's almost always, and this is a sad thing to say, you feel sad to say it, but it's basically like the system we just cannibalize to keep the big one working. It's like a little slave system that follows along. You guys ever seen the movie The Island? This is a good example. The Island is a really dark movie if you watch it. I don't want to ruin anything for you guys, but it is like a 20-year-old movie. Who's in it? It's Ewan McGregor. So you're like sitting there going, why doesn't he just use his Jedi powers, right? Anyways, no, him and this girl, I forget, but they basically find out that they're these famous people, and you're like, how the hell are we famous people, but we're stuck on this island? Oh no, you're clones of famous people, and actually they're just harvesting you for parts. Like when that famous person's spleen starts to go or liver starts to go, you get killed so that they can have your spleen or liver. You're basically just a human clone that's used for whatever they need. Oh, they need a heart? Take yours. And you say, well, what happens to the clone? Well, it's not good. It's not good. So if you ever see it, it's called The Island. But anyways, yeah. Probable Steve, that's one of the weirdest things I've ever seen there. That and that movie, The Island. I'm just kidding. That wasn't a bad movie. It was just weird. So anyway, so we could come in here and we can learn the basics of networking, but that all falls into like the skills you need in again Linux. Like I try to tell you guys this, and this is a thing that's true. You're gonna hear often as like a Linux engineer, oh hey, just throw that over to Scott. Scott can figure it out. Scott figures everything out. And you're like, well, that's not really in my wheelhouse, but as it were, I do figure out pretty much everything. And you're just going to have people just basically like throwing stuff on your desk to fix or build or whatever. And it's like, well, that's kind of what we are in the company. We're the people who figure stuff out. So what I say by that is if you know that that's where your value is, and you know that's what's going to keep managers coming to you, and that's going to keep you busy, and that's going to keep you moving up the ranks. Well, I mean, we don't complain about the station we have in life if it's a pretty good station, but I'm just telling you guys, you will be asked to do things around networking and security. You got to remember this. You are the Linux expert for security for that company. Your engineering team, your security team, which is your GRC, that's your governance, risk, compliance. They literally they are, and I'm not saying this for all of them, I'm saying this for most of them, they are check mark monkeys. For the most part. I'm not trying to say that to disparage. I've known some really good GRC people in my time that were actually Linux engineers or have a background in tech. But a lot of people that get in security, and by the way, I've watched more people burn out in security with this than anything, where they go in and they think they're going to be doing all this cool work, and everybody thinks they're going to be the red team lead and the hacker and this and this. But then they fall into a GRC role and all they do is audit all day. And all they do is have to go tap guys like me on the shoulder and say, hey, will you fix this? When are you going to fix it? And just, they draw everybody's ire and everybody hates them. And they're basically like wearing one of those hall monitor sashes. If you guys remember, if you don't remember that, go watch the old Simpsons episodes where there were like the hall monitors that kept the kids from doing stuff that they shouldn't. Yeah, who wants to be that guy? I mean, maybe one or two people want to be that person, but you're just sitting there looking at spreadsheets all day of errors that you don't get to fix. That is, I mean, as I think about it, that is literally like a nightmare for me. I would literally wake up every day in a cold sweat dreading to go to work if all I did was look at problems that other people have to fix. And all I have to do is worry all day that the problems aren't getting fixed, but I'm not the guy that gets to fix them. That's like the worst thing for an engineer. Like, we just want to fix stuff, right? So anyways, that's security, right? You're the Linux expert for the company. So how do you get better at security? Well, we've got a course. Again, our courses are all free, but our course on security is here if anybody wants it. Again, I'm not selling you guys anything that costs anything. It's all free. This teaches you about the first thing that I would tell you is make sure that you understand. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. Build standards and compliance. Like, if I'm going to build a system, I'm going to build it to a certain standard. And you say, well, what's the standard? Well, you have tools like the CIS benchmarks. They're common. STIGs. I almost always do STIG standards because I work with government a lot. STIG standards are out there free. You say, well, how do I get this, compliance frameworks, STIGs, CIS, those are benchmarks. Say, how do I get better at those? Well, there's a few ways. I mean, this course makes you do labs on them, so it teaches you some of it. But the other thing is you can go download the STIG tools. There's OpenSCAP. It's an awesome little workbench tool that will help you build stuff. You can actually, as you build, you can choose profiles. Nowadays, if you were to build like within an Anaconda installer for like a Rocky or like a Red Hat box, you can actually build to a certain standard. So that's kind of cool. You can just lay it down up front. You can apply with Ansible or Bash scripts. So we can modify things that we've downloaded and pulled. So we actually have a lab on that in Killer Coda in the automation section where you go and you apply the Ansible script to an image to get to a certain level of security. But compliance frameworks sound good. You're like, oh, well, that's cool. So I could just do that and be ready. I'd be done by noon on, for whatever, you tell me I need 10 different server types for a high performance compute cluster. I do that in a few hours with a bunch of scripts and I can just have them all running. And I say, yeah, that's true. However, there's always a give and take with security. We have to go and we have to ensure everything works. We have to do regression testing. There's all kinds of things to make sure that our operating system still meets the base operational requirement. Because it's a true dichotomy. It's not a false dichotomy. It's a true dichotomy where we say it's either security or it's productivity. And there's a saying that says security is the enemy of productivity. Now, what does that mean? Does that mean that we're not about security? No, we're still about security, but we understand that security slows us down. And you say, what do you mean by that, Scott? And I say, well, if you just had to walk into work and sit down at a terminal and start typing, wouldn't that be faster than having to get your badge out of your car, going badge through security? Maybe you have to stand in like a man trap before you get into your data center. Then at your data center door, you have to put in your PIN, right? And you got to go in, and then now you got to log into your system. Oh, two-factor authentication to get into our Okta. All that stuff, that's 15 minutes of work, right? Just to get into the system. But then there's always the argument. So security is in some ways the enemy of productivity in that regard. But there's also the thought of, well, brakes are a security tool, right? Like brakes on your car. And I say, if your brakes went out, how fast would you drive your car home? If you had to drive your car home, 3-5 miles an hour, you wouldn't go very fast, would you? You got no brakes. So the security also slows us down for good reason to allow us to go further, right? I can go 80 miles an hour because I know I have good brakes, right? And I know that I have the things in place. We admit that we're unproductive. That's funny. Hayes, how you been? I haven't seen you post on YouTube in a while. I saw like a flurry there for a while, and then I thought I saw something the other day, but I haven't seen anything in a while. We devs have all these Git commits to prove. Yeah, that's funny. Actually, nowadays sysadmins have a lot of Git commits too, because we got to commit all of our Ansible code up. All right, so compliance frameworks, you got to build the system to a certain standard. You've got to securely connect to the network, right? So we connect to the network, but then what are we doing inside the network, right? So over here, we were in this lab. This lab down a little bit. Where are we at? We're here. We were talking about securing the network connection. Let me just hit these buttons real quick. So these are here. And then I say check. Oh, I got to hit all these buttons. There we go. There we go. Validation successful. All right, so it'll move me forward. And I say check the open ports on the system. So one of the things about connecting to the system correctly or connecting to a network is knowing that our system can only be connected to, kind of like if you guys remember from like health class when you learned about viruses and stuff, and you learned how they connect to cells or can be connected to by cells to take apart or whatever was going to happen. And you go, let me clear that. And you go and you find out that with our servers, when they connect into a network for TCP/IP, they're going to listen on certain ports. Your system, if your system's not listening on a port, a system like another system can't force its way in because your system's not even listening, right? TCP/IP at the end of the day is a very polite protocol. And what I mean by that is it was designed to just work and for systems that were willing to communicate to each other to be able to communicate to each other. However, security was not a major consideration in the early TCP/IP implementations, right? So where I'm going with that is your system has between 0 and 65,535, that's 2 to the power of 16 ports, right? For TCP and for UDP. And you say, oh, Scott, that's too much. Well, I'm not going to remember all that. You don't have to memorize all that. I'm going to show you where you go reference it because that's more important than memorizing anything. But you can see here, all my UDP ports that are open are right here. The things that my system is looking for a UDP connectionless sets of packets to come in would be right here. And then TCP, where a system would connect and establish communication with me, and then we would negotiate, and then I would agree to talk to it. TCP is down here, again, another set of those ports. How's it going, Twisted Seed? Hopefully this stuff's useful to you. I do appreciate that Prime. I don't know if you guys know this, but Prime, if you have it, you can use Prime anywhere, but if you choose to use it here, that's kind of cool. I like it. You don't have to watch ads. It's pretty good. So Twisted's been around a long time. 15 months, man. I'm sure you've been around longer than that. That's just how long you've been doing Prime, so that's cool. I do appreciate that. So check this out real quick. You don't have to memorize all these ports, though. If you go take a Security Plus, a Network Plus, a CCNA, CISSP, bunch of certs that you can take, you probably need to memorize the basic ones. But when you're learning them, there's a cool little thing inside of Linux where we reference all of them directly from Etsy services. So Etsy services will tell you up here what's going on. They give you a bunch of information about the ports. bunch of information here. And I can then know, let's say I was looking for what that 22 was. Well, that's SSH right here. I see that it's SSH remote login protocol. So I come back here and I say ss-ntulp grep for 22 or SSH, let's say. There's the SSH protocol, and I see that it's port 22. Now, I said force it to be numerical right here, so let's remove that. Let's remove the force it to be numerical, and now you see it's resolving that number from 22 to SSH. But how is it resolving that? How is it figuring that out? It's directly from this Etsy services file. And you say, can you prove that to me? And I say, yes, I can. I'm going to go VI Etsy services real quick. I'm going to go down to port 22 here real quick, and I'm going to say Scott, SSH, Scott, stream. I'm going to do that same exact command again. And now it says SSH Scott stream because it just referenced port 22. But if I don't want to see the reference, because this is, you guys will always see me do the NTULP when we're doing stuff. I don't care what the reference is. I care what the actual port number is. So for me, I just want to see the 22. And you say, why is that? Well, because that 22 is going to become useful for other commands. All right, I want to see the open port, what's happening, what is actually touching that port. And look at this one resolved back to that SSH. That's funny. And change that back. Let's get rid of that real quick. You could also do DW and it would delete to the end of the word. And then now if I do my LSOF, then it's back to just the listener with the resolved name though. That's funny, I didn't realize that did that. But normally I only care about the port number. I just care, just the numbers, right? That's what I want. And it's always going to be the way that your governance teams, your governance, risk and compliance, and your security teams are going to come at you is always going to be based on the port number because that's how their scanners work. Their scanners may say it's SSH, but they don't know. They don't know that kind of stuff. So anyway, securing the network, very important. And you say, well, Scott, how do you turn off those ports? We saw you do this command, and your system was listening to all this stuff. Well, there's backend services that are opening and listening on those ports. There's also another layer of protection we can put in front of all this, which is a host-based firewall, a local firewall. And that's on Ubuntu systems, that's the UFW, the Universal Firewall. On Linux systems, it's Firewall D, which is using NF tables under the hood. So it used to be IP tables, but now it's like NF tables under the hood. But that's all it is just a front-end script that configures those things for you. So you can block that on the front. It kind of looks like this. I show this as an example sometimes. Where do I have that? I think it's streaming. It's over here, yeah. This is the way we were talking about golden images a while back, and when we were getting in on those, where's that? Let me get that out of the way. When we were talking about golden images, we were talking about like how you harden an image in a system. Which, by the way, this is that same baseline thing we were originally talking about. This was my kind of thoughts on like hardening a box, and all I'm really showing you is there's all these available ports on a system. It's 0 to 65, 535, but 535 isn't a real port. So 534 is the top one. And then you also kind of in that space need to know that 0 to 123 is the well-known ports. 124 to some number like 49,000 is your registered ports. And then above that are your multicast and experimental ports, right? But your firewall can block all that shit. Your firewall can just block everything down, and you have to punch through the ones that you want to allow. So if the firewall isn't allowing port 80, it doesn't matter if somebody turns on port 80 and allows a web server out, because you're blocking it with the firewall. So, all right. Anyway, so those are like things that as we build and then connect to the network. And then the next one is you're going to have to flood the systems with these dirty little things that cause problems and send trouble tickets in and stuff called users, right? But we always have users. That's why we exist as admins. Even though we get very cynical about our users, we still need our users, because without them, we'd have to do all the science and research and business work. So it's better for us to just be able to be like the backup operator from hell and just kind of sit there. Anybody here remember the BOFH? He was the backup operator from hell, and people would ask him questions, and then he'd throw printers out. He'd throw printers off the building onto their cars and shit, because he was this operator that like nobody knew what he did, so they needed to keep him around. Yeah, wasn't he? Oh, was he not the back? He wasn't backup. He was yeah, whatever he was. Bastard. That's what it was. Yeah. I forget. That was 20 something years ago. I was reading that. Yeah, you're right. Bastard operator. That is funny. That's even better. But BOFH, right? It was on the UK register.co or something like that. Register.uk or something. It's been a long time. But somebody told me they were rewriting them or writing them again for more modern times. But I haven't read them in 20 something years. But he was always funny. Yeah, people would ask him questions and he just disabled their network account, which is super funny to me, especially as an admin guy or admin guy for a long time. So user access and system integration. So this one dealt with getting users onto the system, and there's this thing that we do a lot called trusts, like establishing trust with another thing. Because guys, you do not want to, as a Linux engineer, be in the business of like keeping track of all the users in the company. I don't want to do that. I guarantee you don't want to do that. So what we do instead is we allow trust relationships to either Active Directory directly or lightweight directory authentication protocol available tools, which almost always for a company is Active Directory. I mean, you know, guys, I tell people all the time, like, I'm an open source guy. I've been using Linux for almost 30 years now, and I've been doing it professionally for almost 25. And I tell people all the time that, you know, we shit on the proprietary guys often, and we talk trash about Microsoft, but there's some places where Microsoft handily wipes the floor with us. One of them is Active Directory. Active Directory has won that battle across the world. They are 95% of companies. They do everything, right? And I'm not trying to, you know, give them any undue praise. I'm just saying you are probably going to have to interact with Active Directory. Case in point here, Active Directory is so popular and powerful that Azure, who is Microsoft, runs it obviously, but AWS, their direct competitor, still has to have an Active Directory component in AWS. You say, really? Yeah, there's an AWS Active Directory tool, whatever, that allows you to pretend you're running Active Directory inside of AWS. Yeah, whatever that is. I forget what that tool is, which is funny because I'm an AWS Solutions Architect Pro. I should know that off the top of my head. I just haven't used that one in a while. But anyway, so after we give users access, then we start thinking about bastions and air gaps and moving our systems off. Now, not everybody, in fact, I'd say most of us, most of all of you, are not going to be able to air gap your systems. You're going to have to interact with the internet where things are dangerous and things are problematic. But bastion hosts and air gaps allow us to move a system off and then control the connection with, and I always give this distinction because people say, well, if I can connect to it, it's not really air gapped. And I say it's air gapped because you can't connect to it via the TCP/IP protocol. You have to switch to some other protocol and come in where you have been authenticated through like SSH or something else like that. And then once you're inside as a validated user, now you can jump through a new network. The networks are completely disparate, right? That's what I mean by that. AWS will work, but we need Azure for Active Directory. 100% twisted. Yeah. I mean, there's other places that Microsoft handily beats the shit out of us, and one is in mail. And you say, but I can move mail. I'm a mail relay guy in Linux. And I say, I know some really good mail relay guys in Linux that run big mail organizations. But when it lands to the user, it's almost always Outlook, guys. It's almost always Outlook with Exchange on the back end. And I mean, that's kind of where it's at. That's actually funny. Yeah. Backup is bastard. I did not remember that. Anyway, so the operator from hell. So bastion air gaps, and I show you guys how to build those. That's very practical and hands-on. And then we talk about updating systems and patch cycles, right? We deal with there's two major ways that we handle system management in the Linux world nowadays. We either deal with a bunch of aging servers that have to be patched and updated over time. Those are stateful machines. Or we deal with stateless machines which don't change, but we do have to update their images, and then as they go down and come back up to the new image, they flip over to like a whole new system every time, right? So we either have stateful machines that are fat aging servers that just get older and older as they go and get more and more problems attached to them, more and more software attached to them, and bloat and all this changes and configurations until they finally die 3 to 5 years later in a typical life cycle. Or we have these stateless images where systems go down and come back up with no changes, but you still compile errors and flaws and security bugs on those things stay there until you bring a new one in, right? So in updating systems and patch cycles, we talked about that. Some of you guys know in my home lab, I run a tool called Werewolf. I love Werewolf. Let's make a new one of these. How do I get into Werewolf? Let's go here. I think I need to... I think I have to go in as me. I think that's right. Maybe? Maybe? Yeah. And then, yeah, because Werewolf doesn't allow you to go in as root, so even if you compromise root on my jump box, you don't get into my Werewolf server. So real quick. So here's our images. Here's our nodes. Let's go to one of my nodes. So we'll just, let's do this real quick. Let's go over here. For people that have never seen this before, this will be useful. Let's go to, let's do like auto, let's go to like auto 5. I don't think nobody's on auto 5. Auto 5. All right. We're going to make a change on the auto 5 server real quick. So here's auto 5, right? Here's auto 5. We're on the same server. I can verify that. Echo. Right. Test to wall. We won't see it because we're not logged in. That'll come out over here, right? So I'm on the same system. I just want to prove that to some of you guys. Let's VI. Let's go to let's just VI etc cron tab, and here's our cron tab. Shift G O, and let's just say this is a test line. We'll write it real quick, and I'll say. So you guys can see there's a test line. Do you guys see that line I just added? Line wasn't there before, right? Some line at the bottom of my cron tab. Escape colon right quit, right? We already knew it was there. We're going to exit out of the server. We're going to go back in. We're going to cat etc cron tab. And we see that test line at the bottom. Does everybody agree with that? I got nothing up my sleeves here, right? I'm not going to do anything tricky. I'm going to reboot this server. We're going to see test 5 reboot on the left. He's going to go and he's going to pull his image, clean image from the Werewolf server. You're going to watch that process happen right here. He's going to come up. He's going to do a DHCP request. He's going to get an iPixie. He's going to find that he is test auto 5 because he doesn't know who he is when he first comes up. The Werewolf server is going to tell him who he is based on his Mac right here. He's going to find out that he's test auto 5 or auto 5 or whatever he is. There he is. And now he's going to go pull the version of a clean image that has that cron tab but without that modification we just made. So all changes to a system that are stateless don't persist through reboot. That's important to know. It is not the same as being a immutable system. Immutable systems we can't change because root is not writable, right? Anyways, where I'm going with that, watch this. I'm doing all this to say this is another way that we maintain servers nowadays. This is the most common tool I've been building in HPC environments for the last... Bless you! I heard the wife sneeze downstairs. She was far away too. I just barely heard it. So this is going to boot. It's going to come up. We're going to go back in. We could check real quick. I'll check. I'll show you that it's been rebooted, right? There's some errors because it's older hardware. Auto 5. He's almost back up. We'll just do a cat etc cron tab. We'll check his uptime too, so you guys know I'm not lying to you. I'm not lying to you, but as engineers, one of the things I think you should do is trust but verify, right? You should look at the data yourself and go, okay, yeah, this is what the data are telling me, and then you could, you don't have to. Assumption will cause you a lot of problems in troubleshooting. It takes about 3 minutes on my older hardware. On my newer box, on my Proxmox box, when I boot it, That's funny. That's a lot to say. On Proxmox, it takes about 10 to 15 seconds. It takes 180 seconds on here. Auto 5 uptime, cat Etsy cron tab. It's not there. Line's gone. So, knowing that, there's some interesting things. We use this process for our lab environment. For people in our Discord that hop in and get their lab key added, you can jump right into our lab boxes through our Bastion. And one of the nice things about that is when you're done with the box and you just hit reboot, it'll zipper you out, kick you out of the whole system, and that box will come back up clean with none of the changes that you did in the lab. And I think that's a great way to run a lab, right? That's how we run the labs around here for people that need them. Anyways, so we were talking about compliance frameworks and security, right? Getting into security, and that was updating and patching systems. Then monitoring and parsing logs and monitoring and learning. So monitoring and parsing logs is how you read logs, how you use systems to read logs, what type of tooling is out there for it. And then monitoring and alerting is more about when there's been a event that reaches a threshold that requires you to send a message outside of the system. Alerting is the idea that we send a message outside of the system, right? There's a lot of good for monitoring and alerting. If you say, Scott, where would you go for this? The SRE Google Books, one of the best places on the web. Right here, I'll link this to anybody that wants it. This is one of the best free sites. This right here, if you were like, Scott, I want to be an SRE, I want to be a DevOps guy, I would tell you to go in here. And security monitoring is a big part of security. And building that out, there's a lot of good information in those books around service level agreements, service level indicators, service level objectives, and how those things interact with each other, right? And you say, oh, that's all business talk. I don't want to know that. As an engineer, your major, thing that you deal with on the admin side is uptime, right? So your key performance indicators are driven by all of those things. So knowing what gets you the bonus at the end of the year is important as an engineer, right? Like knowing what your, if you're what we call a individual contributor, an IC, that's what engineers are always ICs, individual contributors. Knowing what your contributions are they artifacts? Are they server builds? Are they closed tickets? Guys, you may be the best engineer around, but if your company is grading you as like an admin for how many tickets you close, I would highly advise that be the thing that you do the best at, and not necessarily work on the other things. You say, yeah, but I do all this other stuff and I help all these people out and stuff. And I go, yeah, but you're going to be mad at the end of the year when that shitbag over there that played the game gets the bonus, whatever, I don't know, different companies do it different ways. Some make the engineers compete for a certain number of bonuses. Some give bonuses only if you meet thresholds. I'm a big fan of the way, if you guys ever work for an insurance company, I actually worked for an insurance company for a long time. I was a platform engineering lead over at AAA. They gave me a bonus every single year I was there. And the only question was it going to be 100 or 200% of the bonus? So some of those companies, they make money hand over fist and they do pay pretty well. In fact, two of my brothers work for different insurance companies and they both get bonuses every year still. So insurance companies are a great place to go do Linux. One of them runs OpenShift and the other one's a data analytics guy. So anyway, so that's, we were pulling all that stuff up so that we could talk about security. Where are we at? Hold on. I pulled the wrong one up. This one. Let's go back over to what we were originally talking about, which was, whoops, get out of there. Next one was hands-on. So the start of this one was you got to get into Linux admin work if you want to get into this field. And the first one is you need to know skills in Linux. That includes networking, security, and your hands-on or get into your killer Coda labs and build a home lab. Then the next part was you need to learn the job. Like you're already doing help desk, so maybe you're doing operations. Oh, this was for a specific person, right? So somebody had asked me this question. So learn the job. How does a diddle day in the life of a sys admin happen? And for that, we have a sysadmin course and some recordings out there that'll help you see what these skills are. In this course, so this is the Linux admin course, the goals here are to teach you guys these things. These are the course summary, these are the major areas of the course. And then course objectives, these are the things that I want people to be able to say that they can do when they're done with one of these courses, right? The courses are all free, by the way, so I'm not selling you guys on anything. Well, I'm selling you guys on joining the Discord, but that also doesn't cost anything. But course objectives. Can you explain the server build process and hardware system components? Well, maybe I could do some of that stuff. I'm gonna go hop in on a Linux box here. And could I look at like server build process and hardware system components? Okay, so there's different ways that this stuff kind of happens. Haiku, how's it going? Hopefully this stuff's useful to you. I said haiku, haku. Is that like I've been watching, so my brother got me on Adult Swim. So you can go on the Adult Swim site and you can watch, man, I sometimes watch the damn Aqua Teen Hunger Force, which is hilarious. But there's also Haku from Samurai Jack. So Samurai Jack's on there too. So I've been watching a whole bunch of those. Oh, they pay very low. So yeah, sorry Haku, that's not great. But hopefully you find one that pays better. I know for sure that farmers in AAA pretty much pay out their bonuses every year. At least since 2016 for sure. One of my brothers has been with one of those companies since 2016, and the other one of my brothers has been with farmers for 22 years now. He came up from an insurance rep all the way to, he's a data analytics guy for him. So he does like data all the way for like the C levels, the C-suite guys. So, but let's look at this real quick. So explain the server build process and hardware system components. So what hardware? I may know that this is a virtual machine, right? I may know that this is a hardware virtual machine inside of, maybe I even know it's inside of the Zen server. So I know I'm on a VM, but what can I know about maybe the hardware system components underneath it? Maybe not much, if not a lot's being passed through, but could I know the type of processor that I'm on? Probably. I might be able to. I might be able to see the CPU info here. Yeah, look at all that tasty CPU info about my system. I could know the size of the disks, right? I can see what is there. I can see the size of the things that are attached. Now, these are block devices that my system knows about that aren't necessarily mounted. Because some of you might have said, well, what about DF-H? DF-H is great, but this shows you all kinds of things that are mounted, maybe even remotely. So a lot of this stuff is, these are remotely mounted, so they're not necessarily in the physical box if I had a physical server. But what is there? Here's my disks that are attached. So I have an XVDA disk that's attached, right? So I know disk information. I might know, I can get mem info, but that's a lot to read. So maybe free-m would show me maybe something like that. So I have totals at the bottom, and that's in megabytes, right? I think that's actually, yeah. All right, what's my questions over here? Haku said, unfortunately, work for energy. Yeah, okay. I know it's very reductive, but would you say Linux sysadmin course broadly covers what's expected in Linux sysadmin? I think for the most part it does, but I do think there's other things that I didn't get to, right? We only had 16 weeks, so I definitely couldn't show you everything, right? But what I did try to show people was getting in the command line, doing stuff like, maybe kind of a bridge between the really beginners and some of the people that knew what was going on. And then we got into more of like things that are current. So security is a big deal, scripting and understanding how to check your system out, Docker, Kubernetes, monitoring, engineering, like benchmarking and baselining systems, testing, system speed, that kind of stuff. Hardening a system if you need to, which actually goes under security as well. Automation, and then troubleshooting and incident response. So we touched all these different things, but could I touch all the pieces of it? No. But I think I kind of gave enough to like push you off into the role if somebody were really trying. Haku, you said they gave me the opportunity to join as help desk with very little experience, so that made my resume look better to land a job at different companies. Still as a help desk, but double the pay. Yeah, that's nice. Do you have any videos to go over interviewing for Linux sysadmin? No, Haku, but you know what I need to do? I need to get Sending Grounds back spun up, because he was spun up a few months ago, and he was doing a lot of interviews with the guys. Um, we almost never record those, and the reason is when we do those, it's kind of a smaller group. People feel comfortable talking because I need to get people practicing talking. I mean, obviously I'll talk, and Sending Grounds will talk because he's a, I think he might have gotten, I don't know if he got promoted to principal over where he is, but he's at one of the big cloud providers. He's been there for a long time, and he does a lot of interviews and stuff. So he was talking through interviews with people, but we don't typically record them because people will be more candid if they're not being recorded. So I unfortunately don't have anything directly for like interviewing. I do have, so Haku, I don't have it organized well, unfortunately. Like I don't have like an interview section, but I do have what I do in technical interviews. Yes. One of the things here, so let me go find it real quick. I have a bunch of interview questions. I mean, if people wanted to do that sometime, I would. It's just, it would be hard for you guys. Where do I have that? Prologue interview questions. So these were like these were interview questions that I was asking, and then like technical questions. So like when we were doing those, when we would sit down and kind of meet through everything. LG said, hi Scott, I disabled cups on my Linux desktop, checking the stream. Nice. Yeah, hopefully that stuff's useful to you. I remember when there was that cups problem a few years back, and everybody was panicking, and I was like, cups? I've turned off cups for 20 something years. I've never even run that. And then somebody was like, oh yeah, but on Linux desktop they do. And I go, oh, I've only ever, in the enterprise, I've never supported Linux desktop except for my own system. I've always in the enterprise, always been on server side. I've never done like desktop Linux support. I'm trying to think of like a company that even does that. But anyways, that's kind of interesting. So, yeah, Haku. So like I would ask these questions. So if you wanted to know, if you were saying like to that, I'll move these over, to that general idea right here. So we were here, and it's, you need to learn the job, right? So here's the interview type questions that I might ask, because I always get brought in for technical stuff, and I've given probably about 350 interviews in my time as a engineer and over the years, and people always bring me in for the technical stuff. I get called in even to do interviews on other teams when they need somebody technical, even if it's like a networking team or a security team. Not for anything, like I don't do these things typically. Troubleshooting I do, but I don't do like operations type stuff. I don't ask those kind of questions, and I don't ask personality questions, but I added these for the point of the discussion a while back. Also, if you wanted these questions, Haku, these are in the Discord under the meeting notes section. I don't know, probably just look for one of these words like virtualization or something. Anyway, so how would you verify the file system type of an unmounted or of a mounted file system, and is that different if it's unmounted? So you're on a Linux box. How would you know the file system of a mounted file system? So let's say we were here, and would df-h do it? It does tell me the type of file system over here, right? These are all tempfs. But what if I had that other disk, that xvda that I knew about, and it's not mounted? Is it different if it's unmounted? So I do real quick, I say fdisk-l grep for xvd, and I see that disk is there, lsblk, and I see that disk, but if I put like a dash, I think it's capital F on there, maybe it's lowercase f. Yeah, I don't see a file system on there. So I go, well, hold on a second. Could I make a file system real quick? mkfs.ext4, let's say, on dev xvda. Could I just make a file system on there real quick and then do that same command? Now I see that the file system type is ext4, not mounted still, right? That's not mounted anywhere. But could I mount it? Mount dev xvda to mount, maybe. Let's just put it to mount. And now my df-h shows that /mount is mounted from xvda, but that doesn't show me the file system right there. I would have to do something like mount, maybe that, and that would show me it's ext4, or the lsblk-f, and that would show me that it's ext4 if it wasn't mounted. This would show me whether it's mounted or not, so it's kind of useful. Yeah, lowercase f, I was doing, yeah, there you go. So this is a question I might ask somebody, and I'm not asking them to do it at a command line like I just did. I'm just saying somebody will, their confidence in how they kind of answer that will tell you if they've done that before. They're like, oh yeah, well yeah, if the file system is mounted, I could do like a df-h or grep for it and mount, and I would see how it's mounted. I could also do an lsblk-f to see the file system types that are on any system. Like, okay, that's good. Yeah, LG, I would definitely turn off cups. I mean, that's just me. I haven't run cups in forever. I was surprised. I was literally surprised when people were like, hey, you could be using, all you guys with cups are vulnerable. And I was like, like cups? I have that in an old book over there. Like on my, okay guys, I'm kind of like a, I don't want to say the wrong word, so I'm not going to say some type of file. I keep all my books. I have every book for every college class I ever took, and I have every book for every college class I've ever taught out of, plus a pretty good library of fantasy and sci-fi type novels that I've read over the years, right? Although, you know, it's funny, I ask the wife sometimes, I'm like, hey, where's this book series at? And she's like, didn't you give that away? And I'm like, oh yeah. So sometimes I do give stuff away and forget, but not my college stuff. My college books I always keep. I'm kind of fanatical about those. I don't know why. Like, I'm not going to have to build Civilization again with it, I don't think. And if I did, all the protocols would be named Scott anyways. So I would be like, oh yeah, the Scott, the TCP Scott IP Scott protocol was made by Scott in the year 2037 or whatever. And I'd just make it all up. It would, but Scott would be included in everything. Anyways, all right, let's get back to seriousness. Your virtualization team tells you they added a disk to your virtual Linux server. How would you check that that disk has been added to the system, and how would you add it to the LVM system? So this is kind of a fun one if you haven't done it, right? I maybe come over here. Let's go to a server that's not, I think I have servers in here that aren't really doing anything. Let's see. I want to go, some of these are going to be decommissioned soon, so maybe, but let's not break any servers that are live. Let's go to, what server? I think Werewolf. I think we added a storage on Werewolf the other day. I think we did this test disk. Let's go check Werewolf. So we exit out of here, clear. Let's do a lsblk-f on here and see what's going on. So there's the A, the B, and the C. They're all being used. They're all part of LVM. I can see that with PVS, VGS, and LVS. Those are my favorite commands to kind of see what's going on. But let's say that because I did see when I was just looking a little while ago, we are kind of filling up his root disk a little bit. So let's give him a little more disk space. Let's say that we were going to add a disk, and we'll just say storage disk, and let's give him another 50 gigs, right? So now we're functioning right now as that virtualization team that we just mentioned, right? We're just adding a disk, and let's do it out of we have a bunch of gigs free. We'll do it out of lab SSD because we want to be on the faster disks, right? So this box has some faster disks, so we'll add it from the faster disk storage, which I'm pretty sure all the rest of them are on. Yeah, so we're staying on the same disks. Okay, now if I come back, oops, don't exit. Let's let that add. If we come over here and we do our same command from earlier again, just so it's like for like, now there's that XVDE, that new disk that doesn't have anything on it. And if we do PVS, VGS, LVS, we don't see XVDE allowed as a disk inside of the logical volume management LVM tool, right? So the question was, your virtualization team tells you they added a disk. Can you prove that they added it? Yes. I would use lsblk. I would also use fdisk-l. XVD is my disk types. There's my disk, my new 50 gig disk that I asked them for. Yes, it's there. Cool. Boom. And that's read in real time. You guys didn't see me do anything on the server to get that to work. That came in directly from the virtualization, right? So now I have to add that into, I want to make that part of the file system, right? So if we were to do like a df-h, we would see that dev mapper root right now is 194 gigs with 87 used. So it's 194 gigs. We're going to add about 50 gigs to that. Well, how do we do that? Well, it's root is dev mapper rl root, right? So PVS, VGS, LVS. Physical volumes It's not added to logical volume management yet. I don't see it. It's not part of the volume group that's expanded. It's kind of like pulled over all those disks. And then from there, it's not been carved down into root. So let's do that real quick. PV create is going to add that as a disk. So dev xvde, it's going to add it. So now when we do PVS, we see that disk right there. Now we're going to give him to the volume group. We're going to basically expand that volume group. We're going to stretch it over the top of that. Like one of those little swimmer hats. You see those little swimmer hats they pull over their heads? It's like going to stretch it over the top of all of these. So VG extend. And we're going to extend the VG, which was RL, that's the only one we have, to dev xvde, right? We're going to give him xvde. So now we do PVS. And we see him there added to that volume group. We didn't see that earlier. He wasn't part of the volume group. And then VGS will show that the volume group has this extra free space. Now we're going to carve that free space down into our logical volume of root right here. So we're going to say LV extend -R capital, I think it's capital L, plus 100. You can do this different ways, but % free. That's the way that I like to do it. And I can never remember if it's an upper or lowercase. And then we're going to do dev mapper. Where's that name? It's right here. Dev mapper RL -root. That should, yeah, that should do it. Whoops. It's L, lowercase L then. I always forget these. All right. So now that's going to add that disk. That's going to carve it. It's going to add all of that extra space. And because we added the R in there, it's going to resize the file system in real time. So now that thing is 50 gigs bigger, right? So now our dev mapper root, our volume group has been stretched over it, our logical volume and our XFS file system. I'm pretty sure it's an XFS. Our XFS file system is now extended over that. Yes. See that? So that's how we add that in. And now, do you have to know those commands like by heart to just like rote off, call, you know, tell me, oh, I know exactly what he's doing or whatever? No, you don't have to be able to do that. But you do have to, hey, Rob, how's it going? Thanks for the raid. Man, you're getting big, 56. That's pretty good. What were you working on today, Rob? I didn't actually pop over there today this morning. I'm kind of on early for me. But for people that are coming in, we were talking about getting into the Linux field, getting into Linux admin work for people that want to do that, or again, admin to engineering roles. So we were talking about basic skills in Linux, and then we were talking about learning the job. That's where we're kind of at now. What does the diddle or the day in the life of an engineer look like, right? And one of the guys asked me, one of my regulars, Haku, was asking about the interview questions, and that's kind of a little later because it's the bottom part of this. So first I think you need to know the job, then I think you need to learn the job, then I think you need to put a good resume together, and the last one is I think you need to practice talking through an interview. So then we were over here on interview questions, and I was talking about your Linux virtualization team adds a disk. What are you doing? How do you prove? So what we did was we added a disk to our system in XCPNG, storage disk. Then we came over here and we did a full adding it to logical volume management with a PV create, and we did all these things, right? So we did all this stuff. Yeah. So yeah, if you guys don't know RWX Rob, you should follow him. Hold on, let me shout out. And a lot of you guys don't know, or if you don't follow me or follow Rob, you don't know that like I started streaming back in like 2021. It just wasn't going well, man. I didn't have very many people. I was just kind of hanging out by myself doing Linux and stuff. And I was hanging out in Rob's stream one time, and Rob was like, oh yeah, man, I like your stuff, Scott. Don't ever quit. Like, he was like my Samwise Gamgee. He was like, don't you dare quit, Mr. Frodo. And I'm not saying I'm the main character and Rob's not. What I'm saying is like, he basically kept me going because I was like, fuck this stuff. You know, like, what am I doing this for? Like, but you got to do it because you love it, right? Like, and my goal really is to see people get into Linux, right? Like, I want you guys to take this torch from me and run off and go do this stuff, right? Yeah, Amonist 40. Hopefully this stuff's useful to you, right? We've got a community where we try to get people doing Linux. That's our goal. So, yeah. So what we were doing here again is we were taking a disk that was added by our team. We were proving that it was added. So can you prove that disk from your You know, because you may be the Linux engineer on a team, but you're not the hardware guy, or you might not be the storage guy, or you might not be the virtualization guy. It depends on where you guys land. Some of you are going to land to be a jack of all trades. You're going to be the only person they have that can do their technology. But when you're in a corporation, sometimes you're sending trouble tickets and doing, you know, change requests and stuff to get this stuff from people. So you're not going to get all that stuff. Yeah. So in the virtualization world, yeah, they give you this disk, which we found right here. I'm going to go back a little bit. That disk was not there. XVDE was not there. There's XVDC, B, and A. Then we added that disk and oh, look, none of the stuff was there. XVDE is not there right here. Then we added the disk and we went and we looked, and there is the disk. It's sitting there all lonely. It doesn't have a file system on it. It's not part of the logical volume management. I even showed you guys, PVS is your physical volumes. It's not, it hasn't been, the logical volume management tool has not been given permission to use that disk yet. Not there, not there, not there. So then we said, okay, do we see the disk? fdisk-L, great way to see that the disk with all 50 gigabytes there are there, right? Then we go down and we see that the file system was originally 194 gigs, right there. And it was on devmapper rl-root. So that is devmapper rl is the volume group, and the -root part of it is the actual logical volume carved from that volume group, right? So these are the things that we're going. Yeah. So yeah, you guys are all welcome to hang out as long as you want. I love Rob's stuff. I hang out there pretty often. I've been with Rob. Oh shoot, I've probably been watching Rob well before I started streaming. So maybe even early 2020. Just kind of hanging out in there because like I'm a Linux guy. I've been a Linux guy for a long time. So yeah. So then we checked, right, and it wasn't there. And then we started doing changes to our system. We did a pv create command, and pv create on dev xvde said to me in my mind, because like what a command's technically doing and what the net output is always different to me. So in my head, this is permitting the logical volume management process in my system to use the xvde disk. That's what this is right here to me. So yeah, so it says physical volume created. And then we go through, like as we do with all things in the command line world, we set something, we check something. So we set it, right? We told the system it could use it. And then we did our PVS, which is physical volume show. And it showed that there's this new disk down here. That disk wasn't there before, XVDE. And it didn't, and look, it's not part of a volume group yet. And it has all of this free space. Cool, 50 gigs. If I were talking in an interview, I'd be able to say, yeah, PVS would show me if the disk had been added into the logical volume management system yet or not. Now, if I was a Linux admin that had been doing this for a while, I would know that just by somebody adding that disk would not be added there. So that would be my first step. If somebody said, well, how would you add it? I would say, well, I would do a PVS and I would see it's not there. I would do a PV create and add it. There's my disk. Then I would do a VG extend to allow the volume, to pull the volume group, which is multiple disks, over that disk as well. So right here, VGS did not have it up here. VGS only had 3 disks, 3 physical volumes. Now right here, it extended over successfully. So now when you do your PVS, you see that he belongs to the volume group RL. And then VGS shows that he has 4 disks, and he has now these 50 gigs of free space that he did not have before. Now we have to take that and we have to carve that into the file system. So the logical volume, and I did the command wrong because I did a capital L. You want the lowercase l. I always forget which one it is. And I did an LV extend with the resize of the file system, which only works, by the way, with ext4 and XFS. If you do other file systems there, I don't know. Well, I don't know that it'll work. I know for sure that it works with ext4 and XFS. I don't know about other ones because I've never tried them. But we did it against devmapper root, and it made that bigger. And then we come down here, and instead of having 194 gigs, we have 244 gigs. So we have successfully added that disk. So Haku, if you were asked this question here, you might not be able to sit at a command line and do that like I just did. But in your head, you can say, okay, if they've added a disk to my system, if the virtualization team has added a disk to my server, I would be able to find that with these commands. I would go in and I would do an lsblk-f to see what disks were there and what file systems were on them. And I would see that there was one that wasn't, or I would say, fdisk-l and grep for just the, and the reason we grep fdisk-l, so some of you guys are like, why are you always grepping that? Fdisk by itself is just going to dump way too much crap to the screen. There's spaces and all this crap. So when I grep for like xvd, because that's the extension that I care about. See how it comes out real clean? That's all I want to see. So on most file systems, that would be like an SDB or an SD. SD would be a good thing to search for there. But since I'm on a virtualization within Zen server, it's XVD for me. But it'll be a little different for you. Yeah, so then you say, okay, my disk has been added, but then I would do PVS, VGS, LVS to see the state of my logical volume management tool, because that's logical volume management, which is something that they're using. Then I would say, okay, how do I add it? I do a create, I do an extend, right? That kind of stuff. Dr. Farias, I hate having to mount an encrypted volume by an LVM name that already exists as a mounted LVM with the rescue system, as it won't permit it. You have to rename it. Last I knew, so frustrating. Yeah. There's all kinds of troubleshooting stuff like that nowadays if I run into something like that, I just have to go hit it with the Googles, take an internet safari, figure it out, DuckDuckGo, whatever I'm working on. But yeah, there's a lot of problems that can come up for sure, right? And one of the things that we get down into here is like troubleshooting, because like I will talk through troubleshooting a lot if people want me to, for sure. I have a whole talk on that. But how do you check the last login of a user on a system? This one's good. Like, how do you know who's logged into this werewolf box, right? And that's a good question in an interview, because maybe there's a specific reason they're asking. So you just come right off and say, well, I could type in last and it would tell me all of the user logins, right? And then a follow-up question might be, what kind of information would you get from last, right? Well, I can see the last time the system booted. I can see all the times that users have logged in and where they've logged in from, and if they're still in their session, right? Those kind of things. Yeah, watchmakering, some of those commands that I was just showing, like PVS, VGS, LVS, they're really good to kind of figure out and learn. I actually show that in our course over here. One of the first things we do is storage and logical volume management. So that is something that I really emphasize in the Linux admin group. And for people that aren't from around here, or if you guys are still hanging out from the raid, we have a bunch of free stuff. All of our stuff is free, but if you go to, well, you have to really look to find anything to pay for. But if you go to our home page here, there's a bunch of books that the guys maintain. They are, where are the books? Well, there's a repo too. Where do you guys have it? Here, Linux admin security course. And so we were talking about the Linux admin course here, right? And the courses again, it's all free, but you can come in and you can look at the intro, figure stuff out, go to the worksheet, and then the worksheet always has my recording on it from YouTube, and then it has a bunch of stuff for you to work through. Again, people can do as much or as little as they want of any of this. Then you've got labs and places that you can go do the labs. But we were specifically talking about Unit 3 storage, and then going into the lab and then looking at, there's a little bit about lab warm-up. I always make you guys just kind of get your fingers loose and then come over here and look at how you might make a file system and how you might go check to see what's going on. If you're in my home lab, how you would do it. If you guys need access to the home lab, you go into the Discord, go to the lab section. It tells you how to get in the lab, right? I have labs available for people. It shows you how to create things with, again, if you're not familiar with scripting, that's just some basic scripting to loop over disks. You could do this command individually by itself and it would be fine. You would just take out the variable here of whatever disk and you would just put in whatever disk you needed to. And then you could carve up your disks and do all that stuff. So I do have a lab that shows you guys how to do all those steps I just showed. So yeah, Habdams, we are starting the course again. Yeah, so that's actually a really good point. We are starting the course again on, if we go to our Discord, there's always so much stuff going on in the Discord. I'm embarrassed to even show it sometimes. Yeah, the Linux admin course 8-week compressed is going to start on February 21st again. And then you want to check that in your local time, because for me that's 3 p.m. in the afternoon. But for you guys, that could be any time around the globe, right? We're going to do an 8-week compressed schedule, so we're going to do 2 a week. So it's going to be pretty balls to the wall. Some people get people that do the whole course. They get one of these. We've only had a few people do these lately, though. So here's our prologue, and we can go verify, and then like here's me, right? So this is mine, and then that's what it looks like if you do your. Oh, it's pretty big. That's what that looks like right there. And by the way, if I were to take this link, I could take this link and put it on like a resume or something, and then when somebody goes and checks the link, it would go to that certification. So there's that for sure for people. Yeah, Haiku. Yeah, and guys, we run these out of the Discord. All that book stuff is done by the writer's room. Oh man, what's going on here? Somebody spamming again? Yep. All right. Hold on. We gotta do the thing, guys. We gotta do the thing. I don't know what that person's doing, but now they're gone. Yeah, there we go. I don't know. That was weird spam. Yeah, I don't have to do that very often, right? I try not to do that, but sometimes people want to get spammed out. Oh, but anyways, yeah, nothing in our Discord costs anything. Like you have to look around to find something to pay for. Man, what else is going on? Looks like people are working on all kinds of cool stuff. But anyways, yeah, go check the event page. There's all kinds of stuff. If you're on a phone, it's on the top right, because I use my phone quite a bit for Discord. It's on the top right in there. So, and then let's see. There's Discord on the YouTube side, guys. Discord is down in the subject if anybody wants that. So, all right. So that was the you know, how do you check the last, like who was in a system? And then this one's kind of straightforward. A lot of you guys have seen me do this often. Some of you guys have probably done this. But can you list all the open ports on the system? Can you show all the processes attached to any port? And why might you want to know this? So if we were in a system here, in my werewolf box, and ss-ntulp maybe would show all of the processes that are on the system that are listening. Here's all my UDP. And then maybe here's all my TCP, right? Boom. And I can see what my system's listening and what ports it's listening on. And I forced it to be numeric. I didn't allow it to give me the resolved numbers here, because I don't care what the numbers resolve to. I don't want to even know. I just want the numbers. And then, can I tell what process is attached to that? So I see here that it's process ID 870 for SSHD, but how might I find out more information about that? Well, it's SSHD, so I might go system CTL status SSHD, and I might see that that's 870 right there. Okay, so that's some indicator. I see that it was started via system D, so that's cool. But did you guys know I can also do this? So I can do PSEF grep for, let's just say 870. That might find some other ones, because there's some other things that have longer numbers in them. But real quick, here's root started 870 SSHD, so that was the daemon with the listener. But hold on, do you guys see that this is a 1 right here for the parent? That's the parent PID. So this is the PID, the process ID, and this is the parent process ID. Well, what the heck does it mean that the parent process ID is 1? Does anybody know what the parent ID in modern Linux, for sure in all your RHEL boxes, but it's maybe different in systems I don't use much, but for sure RHEL and Ubuntu, all these, the parent process ID of 1 is always, it's always 1. Well, init, or in this case, system D. Yeah, system D, the startup of the box. So you say, well, so who started this? If I didn't know that it also had a service configuration, I would know that it was started by the system daemon right there. That's what that 1 means right there. My papa is there. Now look at this. I'll show you guys some stuff. We can really dig in, right? As engineers, we can do systemctl cat SSHD and see where that system configuration comes from. This is userlib systemd, so this is something that's controlled by the system. That is a file that can be changed if we update like an RPM package or something, as opposed to like etc systemd system, which is something that I write or my team writes, and those things don't get updated by the system. You say, what's the difference? Well, because if the package manager updates this, it blows away all my changes. But if I write my own, and those are the ones that are starting it, that's going to be different. And you say, well, where? So these just get linked in. So these all just get linked in there, right? Yeah, that's how we know what the startup is at the different levels. It's just links. Like if I did this, watch, I say systemctl disable SSHD. All it's going to do is tell me it's deleting the link. And then if I do enable, all it does is recreate that link. That's all that's happening, guys. It's like even back with the old init RD days, and we would just go, all we would do is link It's like the silliest thing. We would just put scripts in there and give them the startup order by like a little number at the beginning, 00 through 99. It's ridiculous, right? But this is the way that the systems worked and started. Hold on. So this was system CTL, right? So let's see. Let's say system CTL. Let's look for failed services. So I do have a failed network manager on here for some reason, so I can go figure that out. But watch this. I love this system D analyze. We could do blame to see the full speed of the startup, but I want to do this critical chain for SSHD. This is how SSHD started on my system. Whoops. SSHD, you need the full name. All right, dot service. Oh, that's my bad. Dot service. You need the full thing. That's my bad. But this is, so you say, what do you mean by critical chain? This is the dependency chain from the system starting down here up until SSHD started. So if something needed to speed up, if I needed to pull something out, if I needed to change the way my system booted, specifically for SSHD to work a certain way, this is the dependency chain right here that I could go modify or work on, right? Guys, there's so many things that like you can really dig into on a system if you want to. My Werewolf box is obviously a Rocky server, right? I mostly build Rocky for the government. I've told you guys before, in the last year and a half, I've deployed I think somewhere between like 14 or 15 supercomputers for the government, high performance compute systems, and all but one of them were Rocky Linux. The other one was RHEL, and it was for a company called Anduril, which is pretty big, and they have the money to have a big Red Hat subscription still. But a lot of companies a lot of the government's doing Rocky nowadays. In fact, like I said, like 14 of 15 supercomputers. Anyway, so then I know it was 870, so I say LSOF-I on port 8 for port 22, because that's the port number that I was listening to, or -P against the port the PID 870, and I can see this is all the libraries, all the dynamic link libraries, everything that's being opened by that SSHD process. Here's everything. Here's all the file descriptors it has open. All the stuff if you want to dig in on a Linux box and really know what's going on. So your security team comes and they complain that libgcrypt is at an out of date, whatever, and then you can prove to them that your SSH is still running off like a newer version or something, and then they can't complain or whatever. The point is, this is what your system's actually doing. You're not just some, as a Windows user, and especially if you do Windows in the enterprise, you have no control over that box you're on. You are just some person on there. Even if you're an admin and you're doing stuff on it, you still don't have a lot of low-level controls of what's going on. But on Linux box, you can see literally everything that's going on inside that server. These are all your commands. If you guys need any of those, there's all the commands I was just doing right there. If you guys need any of them. But yeah, so could you list all the open ports? Yeah. And can I talk about what's happening? Yes. And if somebody says, well, when would you use Nmap? Because I hear it all the time from people. I just Nmap it. Well, that's cool. Nmap's fine if you don't have control of a system. Nmap is a great tool from the outside looking in. But if I'm inside the server and I'm root, this is king right here. Why would I Nmap my own box if I'm root on it? It doesn't make sense, right? Now, if I was on an environment where it was poorly documented and I was being dropped in, because I tell you guys all the time, I do get dropped in. They just basically like give me a little lunch pack and a little backpack and throw me into an environment, and I have to work on stuff. Sometimes I get embedded with teams I've been embedded up to a year before on teams where I'm just kind of helping them get stuff set up and their documentation and get their kind of system back under their control. That's something I do often for my company. And I will Nmap if I don't know anything but my jump box. Like if everything's dark and silent, I can span out and find it. But if I have control of the boxes, I wouldn't use Nmap. There's no, Nmap's an outside tool. That's like if we're surveilling a system or we're doing reconnaissance, right? That's Nmap is part of your attack, miter, kill chain, right? That's different. Anyways, can you loop over a list of servers to validate that they all have the same kernel? Could you do that? If I asked you how you would do that, could you do that? And hopefully Haku's still around. Haku, you've been talking, so I think you're still here. But could you loop over lists of servers? And I guess how would you do that, right? Well, maybe if I on this system, yeah, you're still around. Yeah, so if you're and this is I think this is valuable to anybody, and this is the topic we're talking about is getting into the Linux field. But how would you loop over a list of servers? Do you know how to do that? Like, I'm saying this for anybody. Does anybody know how to do that? This is an important skill. This is an important skill for us in the systems world. If I come over here and I say cat etc hosts, and I see that I got a bunch of them, so maybe I'll just go grep Rocky from etc hosts, right? There's my Rocky servers. So I have these Rocky servers I can hit. And actually, a bunch of them are down, so I'm going to say auto. Let's do auto servers. So I got a bunch of auto servers here. Could I maybe loop over a bunch of servers? We could use Ansible. Yeah, Ansible. If we have Ansible, that's a great answer, Haku. If I have Ansible and I have the inventory, absolutely. Let's see if we have Ansible. We do have Ansible. So here's my auto servers. So I could say Ansible auto, and then I'm going to hit the auto servers, right, as a little ad hoc command. Module will be shell, and the argument will be uptime. Could I hit all my servers and get uptime? Probably. Could I do that same thing if I knew I had the auto 5 like I saw, but could I do that with like a for loop? Could I say for I in, and could I do it this way? What? I should have done it like that. There you go. Could I do that? Sure. But is that the most efficient way to do it? No. That's fine. Could I do a sequence here maybe? And do I need the 1? I could actually just do a sequence to 5 and it would assume you wanted to start at 1. And by the way, maybe I want to make sure I'm not lying to you guys and make sure that I'm hitting all the boxes. Could I do that real quick? Sure. But is that, I tell you guys all the time, like by the way, that's the older way that we used to do it when we didn't have Ansible. Now that we have Ansible, why would I do this? Why would I do this thing? Why would I pull a list of servers? Why would I have just the list of servers? Sometimes you do get lists of servers from like admins or other teams or your managers, and they'll be like, hey, can you just go check these servers real quick? Yeah, sure. So maybe vi temp servers, right? And then in here, maybe somebody gave you a list of like auto 1, auto 4, auto 4, and auto, let's say they gave you 2. So they gave it to you like that. Right? So now you do that same command, but right here, you just drop in the, and then that'll go, oops, now you just need the name, right? So now, boom, that'll go hit all the servers or whatever. That's a common way that I used to get like server names from people or stuff. They'd be like, hey, can you go check this? Yeah, sure. I can go check whatever you got, whatever list of names you have or whatever. But yeah, could you loop over a list of servers? Yeah, I could do it with 4. I could do it with Ansible. I prefer doing it with Ansible. That would be a good way to show it. Yeah, 4 I in, and then you could do, that's a wildcard expansion. Yes. And that would just put, yep, that would just put that right at the command line there. I might have to put, is that going to work? Maybe that one won't work. Oh, you're right, I did. Yeah, see? I was testing you guys and you passed. Yeah, there you go, because I pulled the auto off. Yeah, and it's like, it's one of these things where, like, I tell you guys all the time, if you watched me work all day, you'd be like, I don't know how this madman gets anything done. But if you know, if you're just asking questions or you're talking through things, you should know your tools well enough to say, yeah, I could loop over it in 4. Do you need me to write it out? I mean, it's just 4 I in some list, wherever I get the list from, do, you know, SH to the server name, right? Something like that. And I don't think anybody's going to dig in that much, because if you start to answer that to me, I'd be like, yeah, you got it. Or if you told me, hey, I prefer Ansible nowadays, but I would just make sure that I had a properly formatted Ansible file that just had my targets in there, I'd say, you said all that I need. If you say Ansible properly formatted, you tell me like it's got my targets and my host groups, I'd be like, I don't know, I'm good. I think you probably get the game, right? I say, what are the special variables in Bash? Can you name a few and how would you use them? This is one I like to ask people, whatever level they are. Like, what are some special variables in Bash and how would you use them, right? Like, does anybody know some of those? Shell is one, but I wouldn't call that a special variable. It is a variable, right? It is a variable that's there. That's a environment variable. So shell is that's an environment variable. The special variables are more like that. Path is technically also your own, but here's your special variables. $$ sign. What's $$? That's the process ID. Well, that seems weird. That's the process ID of the thing that you're in. So psef grep-i bash. That should be my process ID of the bash shell that I'm on, 2609224. Yeah, here it is, right? So that's the process ID of the process you're in. So that's kind of useful. PS1 is still technically an environment variable. But I love PS1. I love showing the PS1 variable to people because you can customize that any way you want. $? is a great one. So $? gives you the exit code of the last completed command. Super useful for validating if something is or isn't true in a system. I have a whole little lab on that. If you guys want it, I'll give it to you. Yes. So echo $1 is the first variable passed to the command line of a script. The 0 is the name of the process. So 0 is the process, 1 is the first argument, 2 is the second argument, 3, 4. So yeah, you can have a bunch of them. So sometimes we'll just cd to like temp real quick. Vi, let's do temp, script dot sh for sure, right? And we can just say this this is a basic test script, right? Echo our process ID is, right? And then right here we would say $$, right? Echo our command name is, right? And maybe you want space after that. And our command name is like $0, right? And then we could say maybe our first argument is $1, right? And we could do that real quick, and then we can say chmod 7554 temp script. I'm in there, so I don't really need the full path, but I'm an absolute path guy. And then from here, I could run script.sh, and it would say our process ID is whatever it was. Our command name is this. That's the way it was called. And then our first argument is nothing because I didn't give it an argument. And then I say Scott is so great. And then that's our first argument. And then now I give the absolute path to the thing. And now it gives me that our command name was the absolute path to call it. So my point, yes, special variables are always there. They're always going to be there even if they were scrubbed. Environmental variables are here, and environment variables are ones that can be scrubbed. So you can change these. I can change my home. I can change my path. I can wipe my path, guys, and nothing will work in here for me until I reload my environment variables, right? These are all things that you own. I'm always showing users like, yeah, that was given to you by your bash files. You can go modify your bash files. They're your files. You could break your shell in all kinds of fantastic ways as a user, and then I have to come in and fix it. Yeah, those are bash special variables. So the place you would reference those, if you said, hey, Scott, I need to know more about those, is tldp.org. And if you come in here, typically you go to like tldp special variables. tldp.org, you'd find the special variables for Linux, and these are all them right here. And you get a whole bunch of... Now, one of the things I tell people about tldp.org, I think it's a fantastic reference place, but it's also, it's dry. It's super dry. But I do love it. Like if I'm using a certain type of like bash condition and I forget the way that, dash any versus equals equals works, I forget which one of them is going to evaluate an integer versus an expression, I'll come in here and I'll check tldb.org, because this is just a great reference site. One of the things I never remember all these. There's so many of these other things, but this is one of my favorite. TLDP, and then it's comparison operators, right? So all the comparison operators are right here. So if you're like, which one of these is which, or another one is file test operators, I'm just not going to remember all of them. I know them generically, and I'd probably figure them out, and I can read the man pages. But this is a great place if you're just trying to figure stuff out and like kind of like mapping out things in your head that you can do. This is a good little place. TLDP, Linux documentation project. They're pretty solid. File test operators is one that I really think you should know if you're going to do scripting. And I don't want to crap on scripting, because I still think you need to be able to script stuff. You definitely need to be able to troubleshoot scripts still, because they still exist from 20 years ago on some systems. But you need to, for sure, understand these, the file test operators, even though Ansible exists. Because Ansible is great for us pushing stuff to a lot of different systems, but sometimes the things you need to do might require a script. So don't think, even though Ansible is a great tool, it's still just a tool in our toolbox. It's not the only tool that exists, and I tell people that often, because I am pretty I'm a big fan of it. It's just Ansible's not the only thing, so don't ever get sucked into thinking it is. All right, so anyways, these are the course objectives for that stuff. What commands might you use to determine if a package is installed on a Red Hat system, right? So you're on a Red Hat system and you want to see if a package is installed. LG said, I begin to wonder, really want to do all these logical things on Bash instead of other. Yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of, if it gets more complex than like just hitting a couple of servers, I tend to switch off of like a Bash only thing. I cut my teeth originally on Systems World with Perl, and Perl doesn't really get supported much. So like most stuff, if I'm writing stuff like that nowadays, it's I'm doing something in Python. So. Yeah, DNF's a great tool. Let me show you how I would find something. Let's say we're on this werewolf box, and we know he's CentOS, or he's Rocky Linux, right? And I say, well, I could do RPM QA and look for like grep for OpenSSL. Let's see all the OpenSSL he's got. Okay, I see that they're there. So that's kind of useful for finding, like if I widely wanted to know if there were things called like OpenSSL, you were a Perl guy? Yeah, I loved Perl. I used to be on the Perl Monk site. I loved all that stuff. But Dr. Nefarious said, whenever editing profile bash similar login, always edit in one window and then log in with a new session. Oh, that's a very smart thing for sure. You do not want to accidentally break your ability to log in. Yeah, over the years, especially as an admin, I have had to pull so many users' dot files out and repopulate them from Skell over the years, because Etsy Skell is where those all come from, guys. That I think I even just wrote a script at one point where it was like, it'll just strip it all and put it in old, so all their modifications are there, they can pull them back. But yeah, because what you'll find, and to Dr. Nefarious's point, people will come in to an environment and they will drop something from an old environment. Or, I deal with a lot of research doctors and very smart people who have very like designed environments from other things, and they'll come drop their whole environment in, and then their shell doesn't work anymore. Yeah, so it's like you have to, things don't always fit nice, and especially in different environments and different, you come from an Ubuntu environment and you try to drop that same thing, and it's not going to work the same on all the systems. You might still be able to log in, but you're probably going to be seeing one of those bash prompts that says, hey, I wasn't able to finish sourcing your bash RC file, right? But anyway, so let's look at this real quick. So I know I have these, but I can dig in more. So RPM-QI on one of these, so just OpenSSL, really digs into like when was it installed, how was it installed. Other information rolls off of your system. Your DNF logs will roll off a system after time. Your Yum installer, Yum's mostly gone, so it's mostly DNF, but DNF will roll, the logs will roll off. When things were installed and how they were installed via that tool are sometimes there in DNF history. So I may have in the history some things of when things happen, but not always, right? So where I'm going with that is know your RPM QI is based on the RPM database on the system, and it should tell you, oh yeah, we installed this bad boy on this day. This is very, very important for, a dev team comes to you and says, hey, you guys modified the way our systems worked with your last patching. And you say, oh yeah, what tools are giving you problems, or this and this and this? And they go, oh, well, it's this OpenSSL. And you say, OpenSSL didn't get changed in the last version. OpenSSL's been the same way for another way. Hey, let's go find what it is, because there's something else going on in your system, right? I tell you guys all the time, like, as engineers, we don't have to be combative. We just deal in the truth. And it was a red herring or a misnomer or an incorrect logic, whatever they want to call it. We don't have to sit there and push that guy down under our thumb for being an idiot. We can tell him, hey, that assumption you guys have, that thing you said was not correct. This is the correct information. Let's go find the thing that is. Because we tend to be the experts on the Linux side, right? We have to help the company get to where they need to go. So I'm showing you guys all that to say, people are going to come to you with all kinds of things. But anyway, somebody might ask you, how do you determine if a package is installed? DNF is great. RPM is my method. I'll RPM and search for it generally, and then I'll dig into like what exactly do you want to know. And that's a valuable thing. My first foot in the door job, IT, didn't have my computer race, so my boss gave me 2 Perl books. Nice. Learned Perl and walked away. Use it for ETL. Yep. Yeah, I was a Perl guy. There's still Perl stuff that I have hanging out there from years ago that's still running on companies, and that's kind of funny because I have friends that work. So it's funny. Almost all the guys I know left Lockheed Martin because Lockheed Martin left the Valley. Well, they left Goodyear. They closed this big plant back in 2013, and a bunch of my friends jumped ship and went to this company that opened up in the same building doing the same project but under a different name. So it's like that's how government contracting works sometimes. And they started this thing, and one of the guys, I saw him at a birthday party for some of the kids probably about 1.5 years ago, and he goes, yeah, Scott, remember that Nagios stuff you wrote? I'm still supporting that. And this would have been like 2023 or 2024. Yeah, so in the last couple of years. And that was, I had left there in 2013. And he's like, I still support some of that stuff you wrote. And I'm like, yeah, that's funny. And it was all Perl. All my Nagios stuff that I used to run was all Perl. I actually do have that. There's a presentation I did a while back. If you guys want to see some of my like cheap and dirty Perl, I think it's even up just in our generic Linux group. This isn't even in my other talks. This is like a Nagios design document that I did for my mid-range Unix team. This was a long time ago, and this is like my flow drawings. This is my populate Perl that just goes over a list of all the servers and just builds out this. So this is our servers, and then it just built all of our hosts inside of our thing. This is like the just cheap. I don't even it's not even organized, but this is just a little dirty Perl. And then my checks, I would write my checks in Perl too. So you would go do SSH checks, and this was like Scott system checks. This was just an example I made, but it was by me. Goes in, and it just checked to make sure that we were on the right version of a kernel or whatever. And then it would either be warning, crit, or else 0. So you exit different codes in Nagios. 0 is good, 1 is warn, 2 is crit, and 3 is unknown, right? So those are the 4 general error codes that you can have. But I didn't do one for unknown because I didn't need it. Also, I have a logical problem in this, but it doesn't really matter. When this gets bigger, I have to change this logic. But yeah, that was old school. It's been a long time since I did that. Anyway, so I say, what is PAM and how does it work in Linux, right? Pluggable authentication modules. What are those? What is PAM? What are these things doing? All that kind of stuff. And some of you guys might say, oh, shoot, I've never really dug into PAM. Well, we actually do that in one of the security engineering courses, which, again, is free. But I also show people, so here's the security engineering course. PAM is here under user access. But I show people, one of my favorite ways to show people PAM, because, like, you know, if I'm not smart enough, or if I'm not going to be as articulate as somebody else, I'll defer to the person who's more articulate. Watch this. Rocky Linux PAM. They have a really good little doc on how pluggable authentication modules work. So if you're like, I've never used PAM. I don't know how it works. And I say, well, good stuff here. Here is pluggable authentication modules. And if you go through our Linux course, you actually work on those a little bit and mess with them a little bit. But they show you how PAM works. PAM is basically a bouncer at a nightclub that's standing there with a list here, a checklist, and you come up and you say, hey, I'm on the list, and it goes, prove it. And then you say something and it goes, nope, that's not good. But it doesn't ever let you see all these movies where they're like, oh, that's me right there, I'm Dr. Oliver. And you're like, oh, well, naturally, if you're going to let them see the fucking list, they're just going to say they're whoever. Well, it's this idea in systems world where what used to happen is everybody could go and look at Etsy Pass WD to look up user information, and that second field used to be a password field. Even if it was hashed, it didn't matter because everybody could read it and you can go crack the password later. Now everything is abstracted and there's an Etsy shadow file and nobody can look at the Etsy shadow file. Nobody can look at the Etsy shadow file. Well, root can if they want to, but nobody's supposed to. Only the pluggable authentication modules are supposed to be able to take the hash you give them of the password that you made and compare it to the hash that's in there and validate that you are who you say you are. They'd never let you see it, though, so that you can go crack it and do all that kind of stuff. No, I'll sit here like a bouncer with the list, and you tell me if you're Dr. Haiku or Haku, right? And if you're not Dr. Haku, or if you're not, if your credentials don't match up to what I see back there on behind me or on my list, go kick rocks. That's how pluggable authentication modules work. But I'm not nearly as articulate as those cool guys over at Rocky. I think that's a really great write-up, that Rocky write-up, and it teaches you what's going on. So we cat, where's SSH? What's going on here? What are these different modules, and what are these things, and what does it mean to be required or included or optional? I don't know what any of that means. Well, that's what that little document's for. So go read that if you guys want. That security guides thing. I'm going to click on that. Oh, let me click on that. Pull that up over here. I'm going to tell you guys, read your stuff. I'm going to take a quick break, guys. Let me pull up turn off my camera, and I'm going to say hourglass. Quick break. Let's say we'll go 10 minutes. 10-minute break, guys. Stretch your legs, walk around, do whatever. I'm going to move that over a little bit so it's not over you guys talking. You guys can talk over there. Boom. All right, I'll be back. Take a little break. Stretch your legs if you guys want. We're going to do more Linux here in a little bit. Started again here in a minute. Coffee time? Yeah, I used to always drink Monsters during this, but I haven't drank any Monsters in a while. I've been off Monsters for about, I don't know, a couple weeks now. Week and a half. So all the caffeine headaches have left me. That's nice. Kilobyte, good morning. How's it going? We're on a break right now. My Fave Tech, good morning. Happy Sunday over on the YouTube side. Yep. We're just hanging out. What we're doing is we're talking through. So I'll pull this up over here while we're hanging out. But we were talking through these 4 ideas here, which was getting into Linux admin work. And the first one is you need skills in Linux. So we've been kind of looking at those and talking through those. Then you kind of need to learn the job. What's the day in the life of a sysadmin? Like, how does that kind of play out? Where does the work come from? You know, say where. Like you get trouble tickets, you get errors that you see in the system. Where does the work come from? We have a system admin course that kind of helps you with that. And then we talk about you got to put together a resume, right? I think objectively, you have to just know what you are for a company. Like what is the company going to pay you for? What are the values there? We'll get back into this here in a second. We're not quite started yet. You still got 3 minutes of break, guys. But I'll pull up my my little generic resume. Get this out of the way. Pull this up here. I gotta move this out of the way so I can move that. That thing's always in front. That's a rule of that little thing. All right, 2 more minutes of break and then we'll go. But yeah, we'll talk through that a little bit. Move that up. If anybody needs our Discord link, it's right here on the Twitch side. There's our little Discord link. You guys can hang out down there if you want. We got, Discord's just a place for people to hang out and share ideas. That's a little more persistent than any of these streaming platforms where, I can only be on so much. But on Discord, we can always be around. People answer questions. I think we got a pretty good community for that. Pretty good set of guys that want to help people get better at this stuff. We're getting up near 5,000 people, which is pretty good size. Not everybody's always there, but I think we have about 1,000 on at any given time that are actually in the channel somewhere. That's kind of good. Because Discord shows you all that kind of stuff. But all right, we'll finish this up real quick and then we'll continue. Finish up this little break here. All right, let's get going here. Turn the camera back on. Pop myself back up over here. Get off of this. So the question here was, we've been doing all the Linux stuff, talking about getting into Linux. We have a lot of stuff I think that can help you guys with that. And I think there's a lot of things you need to know. You need to learn the job. I think that's also something we can help with. And then you got to put together a resume. Now, I can't tell you that I can for sure. I can't tell you for sure that I can, get you in a job, but I can at least help you know the things that I've looked for in my time of doing this. And one of the things I mentioned here is you need to cater it to each job posting. If you're putting in for multiple jobs, I would be changing the little things in your resume, but we'll talk about that here in a second. And then one of the things that I would maybe do is, as you're going through, you should be putting things down. Like if you don't have any other work experience, you can put down these types of things if you know how to do these things. If you've worked through and you know how to analyze Docker and Kubernetes components and workflows, you can put that on a resume, even if you don't have 7 years in the field doing that stuff. Now, you got to be able to defend that later, right? You got to be able to talk the talk when it comes time. But if you know how to do something, you know how to do it, whether or not you've done it professionally or not. That's an important kind of distinction, especially if you're going for like junior type roles. You can put down these things that you've studied and worked on. So, all right. Anyway, so let's look at my little resume here. So, I would always tell you with whatever you're doing with a resume. By the way, this is very, very similar to a lot of my stuff, but this is all changed with the exception of my GitHub. That is my GitHub, and that is my Killer Coda. Everything else on here is changed, so don't, I mean, if you want to try to dox me, it's not too hard to find out who I am anyways. But this is my generic one, and I lead with the thing that I think is the strongest for me. Now, I want to back up for a second. If your experience is your strongest thing, I think you should lead with that. If your college is the strongest thing, I think you should lead with that. However, for me, engineering, my college may have helped me get the job at certain places where it was required, but I don't think that college is necessarily that important to be a good engineer. I really don't. I think you could do this as one of the few fields you can get into without the college background. Now, I say that with the caveat that I am a college professor, and I'm a firm believer in college as a system. I think it's the number one demonstrably way of moving yourself through economic tiers, at least in the or economic stratum or whatever you want to call them within the U.S. for sure, but probably around the world as well if I had to guess. But where I'm going with that is I start out with my summary of qualifications, and I put things that I think are interesting or useful to the roles that I'm going for, right? Things that I've worked on, and anything here I can speak to or talk about. I don't have anything in here that I can't. If you said, hey, what's that Gremlin Chaos Engineering? We'd talk about it if we wanted to, right? And then we come down to my experience, and I lead with the last 10 years, but because I was trying to crush it down, what I do is I have the most recent. So this was when I was over at the Infrastructure Engineer 5. I was the platform lead for AAA back then. And these were things that I had done for them. I try to make my bullet points here things that are, I don't adhere perfectly to like a SMART model, but the specific, measurable, actionable, results driven, and time bound, or whatever SMART is, but SMART is a good way to start if you're looking for that. And I have only the 2 jobs that I'm still doing. So I'm still an engineer, but I work over with NOAA now. And then I'm a college professor still. And my technical title is there, right? My technical title is there. And then what I do in different classes I've taught. And then for the last 10 years, I just compressed them down in case people want to talk about them. Again, these are all stripped out of who they actually are, right? Except for Best Western, because I would never work for them again. But I was their Ansible architect, and I was laid off due to COVID, which was wild. But that's neither here nor there. And then my education, those are my actual degrees, but not necessarily the colleges, right? And then I have my PhD later this year or early next year, depending on when I defend my thesis or dissertation at that point. But I'm still writing the dissertation now. But this is my resume, right? It's 1 page. Keep it at 1 page. You can go longer. You can go longer in the middle of your career. If you're junior, I would definitely keep it to 1 page. You should have things that are like keywords that people are looking for. People always want CISSP when they're looking for security. Even if it's like firewall administration, it has nothing to do with CISSP. They always want, this is Certified Cloud Security Professional. That's from ISC Squared as well. That's another one that they want. Some government contracts require these. So like these look good, like within my company, having a CISSP and a CCSP actually allows us to bid on contracts we might not be able to bid on otherwise if we didn't have somebody with those certifications. So there's specific certification type stuff as well that matters in certain realms. It's kind of weird. It's like, oh, only certain people can even bother to sit at this table. That's very true in the academic world, in the college world. Man, people love there's an old South Park where they reach back and they smell their own farts. You guys ever see that? They put them in a glass and they swish them around, they smell them. I swear that's how academia is. And it's like I play in that world, and I am, I've been doing that for a long time. I do teach people stuff, but it's like, man, if it's not bad like that. RHCSA is pretty good, Haku. So Holy Grail of higher chance of getting hired in Linux. That's probably one of the best, like just Haku. If you've got nothing, that's probably one of the best ones to start with. RHCSA. Yep. I wouldn't call it like the Holy Grail, but I would definitely tell you that'll open doors. CCNA will as well, but CCNA is more on the networking side. I think some of you guys that have been around here a while know that I got my CCNA when I was still in the Army. I was just an infantry guy running around with my rifle. I didn't even know what a server was, but I passed my CCNA because I studied my ass off. I could program the crap out of router and switch. I still can actually, but I actually still teach those courses. But yeah, and I was a network engineer when I first got out. I became a networking guy. That's what I started at when I first got out in 03. So that was a long time ago. Anyway, so all these things. So you got to put together a resume, and I think you should cater it to what you do. Now, not everybody has Microsoft Office. Not everybody uses those tools. Some people use OpenOffice, LibreOffice. I would show you guys a really good tool that's free called what the heck is the name of that tool? I'm drawing a blank. It's what the heck's the name of that tool? Is completely out of my brain right now. I wouldn't get the CCNA for Linux sysadmin. No, Haku. I didn't know I was going to be a Linux guy when I first got out of the Army. I thought I was going to go networking. But then I loved Linux a lot, and I didn't love networking as much. Networking was fine. It was a fine place to start. I still think networking is a great foundation for people, but I don't live there. That's not so I would tell you not to focus on that if you know you want to do Linux. That's just kind of where I started. Oh God, why can't I think of this? I keep thinking of open something. Hold on, let's go open source latex editor. What is that thing's name? Overleaf. It's Overleaf. So Overleaf right here, by the way, it is open source, so you could download it and run it yourself. But Overleaf has a free pricing model. A lot of people use this for technical. I might even write my dissertation with this because it's just such a nice presentation of things. But in here, look, there's free. There is a free version, right? But you can do projects and stuff like that. It's good for getting started. So we like free around here. But you can come down here. Let's go to the top again, and you can find example resumes. So templates, and let's go to I just need a CV. CV is what they call it outside of the U.S. Sometimes you'll see it in the U.S. as a CV, but we tend to just call them resumes out here. But I see CVs a lot from Europeans and stuff. But they have these big flashy. You guys got to think of how much you want to really spend with this. I like this for tech stuff. This is a nice looking one for tech. And then you can actually open the template and edit in there and save versions for yourself. And then send people PDF versions of a really nice looking. This resume is actually pretty nice looking. That's not a bad looking little resume if you wanted to keep it on one page, right? So if you're like, Scott, where would you go? How would you do this free thing you're telling me about? I don't have all these cool tools. Well, here's a free one online right here. And it's so free that you could use the open source version and run it in a Kubernetes cluster locally if you had a little Kubernetes cluster running. You can actually run your own Overleaf and just send over your latex and it'll generate your PDFs for you if you want. That's not a super hard project to get running. So, well, if you want to be in the Linux world, that's the type of project you might get running. And then maybe you use that to show people, hey, these are some of the skills that I have, right? Make it one of your little projects for a portfolio. I don't have a portfolio on here, but I do think portfolio work is perfectly fine. Building a project, showing these kind of things. I have some labs I have some things down here. If you go into the, presentations, one of our first presentations we ever did years ago here is the one that we did as a big project together on, when I see it in here. Oh, maybe it's on the, I think it's Prologue project. Sorry, it's the beginning of projects. This is where we also used to run the courses out of before the guys built the books. But if you go all the way back to the beginning here, very, very beginning of this one, you'll find it. Damn it. I sometimes hate Discord. You will find at the very beginning, the monitoring deep dive that we did. So here's the monitoring deep dive project guide, and it's right here where we were deep diving into how monitoring works in a system, and that's a nice little thing. In fact, this is the guide, and then this is the actual project, and you could use this as like a template for your presentation or whatever if you wanted to show people that you knew how to do monitoring or something in Linux. This is a nice little template on that. So anyway, so there's a bunch of stuff here around building a resume out and what your resume might look like. We had AI prompts inside. You could probably do stuff inside of their LG. I haven't played too much with Overleaf. I have friends though that do presentations out of there professionally in the doctorate world, like in the PhD world, and that's what they do. That's how they get all their stuff is through Overleaf, and they make really nice presentations. Haku said, since I don't have Linux experience and just help desk, decided to go for a 2-page resume with 1 page for my project. Yeah, that's fine. That's fine, Haku. And by the way, you can also, your resume is going to be out there anyways when you start putting it out, so it's up to you guys how much you want to put out there, but you guys can drop those in the jobs and interview channel, and a lot of times we'll give you feedback. I always try to give people feedback if they drop resumes in there. Or, I guess if you really don't want anybody to see it, you can send it directly to me if you want. If you're in the Discord, just message me and I'll get it and I'll take a look. I'll at least tell you like, hey, I see errors or I see, whatever. I don't mind doing that for people. And then I think you need to practice talking the talk. Feel comfortable in an interview around describing what you know how to do. Do you know how to troubleshoot? Do you know how to admin, build, monitor, and automate server work? And have you done those things? You have to be able to talk to this stuff in a semi-intelligent way, even if you can't describe all the technical aspects of it. Like, getting a tech job isn't all about, like, hopefully I'm not presenting this as like, oh, you need to be super pedantic and speak all the right words. That's definitely not the case for me. I just happen to know a lot because I've been doing it for a long time, and I happen to read a lot of this stuff, and that's interesting to me. But I don't think, guys, you need to be some like deep academic to do this stuff. I really think you can get into this world and keep systems working just by understanding like what has to happen with the system, right? We have to build it correctly, we have to maintain it, we have to then know our troubleshooting methodologies, which, by the way, next week we're focusing on troubleshooting in the automation course. We're going to troubleshoot a bunch of automation problems. That's going to be a thing. And by the way, one of the things you guys are going to notice, the theme will be read the damn alert. The message and the error and the code, they're going to help you out soften this stuff often. So yeah, I do think I think you guys are gonna, if you keep working on this stuff, you guys will definitely get in there eventually, right? There's definitely stuff out there for you. Sometimes, maybe you have to take a step back for a little bit. Maybe you gotta work on. Sometimes I think about it like if anything happened with my job and I had to start over again, I'd probably do contract work for a while if I needed to. Like, it wouldn't be optimal, but it's like I could do contract architect work if I need. I can draw stuff. I understand the technologies, that kind of stuff. But it's one of these things where also, like, especially with contract work, if you're trying to get in, a lot of times you're building new stuff, so there's not as much troubleshooting. It's just working with newer technologies. So now you have cool newer technologies to put on your resume. So I am a big fan of, especially early on in your career, there's 2 places I think that are good to break in. So breaking in the industry, I think there's 2 places that are really strong to break in. Both of you guys already are in tech, the 2 guys talking on Twitch, but if you were trying to get just directly into, like, out of a help desk role and more over into one of these, I would say being willing to work the 3rd shift, and this is for young guys. This is for younger people, don't have a family maybe as much yet, or you're younger and you can stay up late. But for some of you guys, it's like working that 3rd shift, that'll get you in a NOC, Network Operations Center, or a Security Operations Center, SOC. That kind of thing is valuable. To be able to get in on one of those and get that experience. And then the other one is, the way I got into tech was I just found a local school district and I started moving around computers for them. I was a LAN tech, local area network technician. That's what my job was when I got out of the Army in 2003. I just went and worked at a school district, started moving around computers. I was going to DeVry and getting my networking bachelor's, and somebody left, LAN 2 left, and I put in for it, and they're like, oh yeah, Scott works hard, he does pretty good. We'll just put him in charge of all the wireless and all the firewalls. So then I was the networking guy, and I did all the wireless for a big school district with, what do they have, 180,000 kids or something like that? Is that right? Yeah, I think it's like 180,000 kids in that school district. It's a pretty big school district. And I think they have like 6,000 staff. Pretty big size. I think they're up to like 40-something, 50-something schools. There's a lot of schools. My wife still works for them. It's funny, my wife's been a help desk person the whole time I've known her. She's retiring from the school district in 3 years, like almost 4 years. Actually, almost 4 years to the day she retires from the school district now. She'll only be 53 when she retires too. So, anyways, we're looking through all this. Yeah, you got to be able to practice talking to this stuff. And honestly, the best way I can tell you guys to do this is get in a community, right? See how engineers talk to each other. Well, it's not great in our community. I mean, sometimes but you'll see that engineers mess around a lot too, but it's because they take their work pretty seriously, so they joke around more on their own time. But yeah, I mean, you go and you just kind of sit with the engineers, and after a while, somebody asks you a question, they're like, hey, that guy's seen that before. I saw his blog post on it or whatever. And then next thing you know, you're just one of them, right? You're just kind of like sitting next to all the engineers, and then one day you're one of them. That's kind of how it works for most people. You just kind of get brought in the fold and you go walking along. So I always say get in the community, see how engineers talk to each other. So these are my kind of my high level notes for getting into Linux admin work. I'm going to drop these back for you guys that want. If any of you guys followed along and were like, hey, I want that, I'll drop these in the Discord under the meeting notes. Where is that at? Here, typically here. Boom. There's the meeting notes, and then if you need it, they're there. So, all right. Shoot. I wonder if the wife's home yet. She might still be out. What did we hit almost 3 hours, man. That's a long stream for us. But I'm trying to get back into streaming. I'm trying to do streaming like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday nights, and then Sunday mornings we'll do labs typically, and then Sunday nights. If anybody pops in on Sunday nights, I will just be working on my dissertation work. You'll just see me pull this thing up. Some of you guys haven't seen this in a while, but these are my stream notes from like December 2025. I'm just going to keep updating these and just keep going with just more and more of my dissertation work, more and more of the things that I'm pulling out, and as I'm reading through different documentation and stuff. And then here's my APA, APA style 7 format for all my stuff. And then I'll start working this. I have to do the other stuff without you guys, but that'll be pulling all this stuff down into my actual dissertation. And then since I got my IRB done, I can start to gather data. So you can't gather data until you get your internal review board done, but I have that done now. And what that means is, for some of you guys that are in the Discord and do some of the academic stuff with me, people that are interested in it anyways, you guys can see how I'm going to go about collecting data for because I'm going to be doing research and testing around Bastion systems within Linux. And it's a systems engineering PhD, so it's all technical. And we're going to be probably gathering, there's going to be a lot of data that we're gathering, and then we're going to be sifting through it for kind of some quantitative analysis. Look for patterns that we see, things that we see defended against. Ooh, the wife's got some kind of jack-in-the-box over there. I don't know if there's anything in there for me. Oh, she shook her head. Yes, that's very nice. All right, guys, we're going to drop off of here. I didn't expect to leave this quickly, but we're pretty much done for the day. All those notes are up there. I appreciate you guys all coming by. Let's raid out on the Twitch side. We'll go find somebody to raid. I already actually know who I want to raid. Let's see if he's on, because I'm following somebody who... we're going to go to a really high-energy channel, guys. Wait. He's not on. He's dropped. Oh, there he is. Okay. We're going to go raid over to one of my favorite people, Rossberger. And, it looks like he's doing something else. So, all right. I appreciate you guys coming by. For those of you that go over there on the raid, we do all the Linux. That's our raid thing. And I will see some of you guys later. Take care. Let's go pop over to our end of stream here. I can get the sand out of there. There we go.